Bright light streamed through the window, and the banquet table was lavishly set. The servants took turns offering praise. "Congratulations, my lord. Congratulations, young Master Isaac. At only 10 years old, you've already received a nomination to the Royal Academy. You truly are a genius." Lyra smiled gently. "Congratulations, my lord," she added. "Young master, as it is a momentous day, I have prepared only the dishes you love most." Isaac smiled in response. "Thank you, Nanny." He happily accepted it all. Han brought over a large box. "Please accept this as well. It is a small gift from me." Isaac was startled and surprised. "A gift? I already told you there was no need to be so formal." He insisted on giving it. "How could I not? Thanks to the medicine you bestowed upon us when my son was ill, he was able to keep his life," Han stated firmly. "Compared to that kindness, this offering is worth very little." Isaac couldn't help but feel moved. "All right, I'll accept it, thank you." Jonas suddenly ran over, beaming. "Brother, brother." The young boy excitedly brought his instrument. "Let me play a song to celebrate you." Isaac was extremely surprised. Han whispered to him, "Young Master Jonas's lute skills are so outstanding that even the royal musicians praised him as a prodigy last time." Isaac smiled and replied, "Is that so? Then let me hear you play." Jonas immediately prepared. Yes. Small fingers plucked the strings, but the peaceful scene gradually began to fade. Jonas, no." Isaac startled, awake in bed. It took him a moment to recover. Was it just a dream? Isaac muttered to himself, "How ridiculous. It seems I dreamt of a distant past. There is no returning to that time now." Familiar footsteps approached. Lucas quickly reached his side. He brought breakfast. "The day has dawned, young Master Isaac." Lucas immediately sensed something unusual. He realized Isaac wasn't doing well. "Did you have a nightmare? You look terrible." Isaac replied wearily, rubbing his aching temples. "I just dreamt of some old matters." Lucas asked casually, "How long ago were they?" Isaac replied nonchalantly that it was about 20 years ago. Lucas set the breakfast aside. "That was too long ago," instead of dwelling on those ancient, stale memories. Lucas introduced the food. "How about we try some fresh cheese? After you finish your meal, we will start the sword training we left unfinished yesterday." Lucas quickly departed. "Enjoy your meal, my lord." Isaac frowned in thought. About 20 years ago, when he was 10 years old, a month before entering the Royal Academy, he had come down with a sudden, severe flu. The illness dragged on for 3 months. Seeing that the situation showed no signs of improvement, his father, Count von Goethe, had to seek out scholars from the magic tower. He received the news, due to his special constitution. The mage affirmed, "As you know, every living creature possesses its own innate mana container. Mana circulates at a speed corresponding to the size of that container. However, the mana circulation in your son's body is extremely abnormal. It is fast and violent to a degree that cannot be predicted. If this continues, the container will soon shatter completely." He could only hold his head in despair. The truth Isaac had been avoiding finally caught up with him. The mana in his body erupted violently like an explosion and collided with external mana, causing a terrifying mana blast. He had to endure unimaginable pain. Many people were killed or injured. When he finally calmed down, he saw them dead from the sudden explosion. Not only those in the mansion, but even his younger brother had lost an arm. Isaac made the decision himself. "Lock me away." Tears streamed down his cheeks. Loneliness enveloped him in a place no one could reach. Since then, Isaac remained in the cellar, where no one could be harmed. While eating, he told himself, "I was only 15 then, wasn't I?" Suddenly, a heavy hacking cough sounded in his ears. Isaac turned back in alarm. Bright red blood was visible on Lucas's hand. Isaac immediately went pale. He was coughing up blood. It was one of the symptoms of mana poisoning, because he had been by his side for too long. Isaac reflexively clenched his fingers. He rushed forward to support Lucas. "Since you have stayed by my side, even though there was no need to, you must rest for at least a month." Lucas couldn't help but laugh. "If I'm not here, who will serve you? Besides, young master, apart from me, you don't have any other friends, do you?" Isaac scolded him. "Do you want me to kick you out for being insolent?" Lucas left obediently. "Don't worry, you know me, don't you?" He proudly thumped his chest. "Even though you've caused dozens of mana explosions, I haven't even lost a single hair. You won't find anyone else like me." Isaac stood still, filled with anxiety. A single mistake could cost him everything. He turned away coldly. "Get lost now. I'm going to take my medicine. Don't disturb me." "Yes, young master." Lucas respectfully closed the door. "It is my honor to serve you." The space changed. Suddenly, Isaac woke up. congratulations, young Master Isaac. He was wearing formal dress, standing at the center. Everyone was collapsing in pain on the ground. A familiar voice rang out, "You finally arrived." Isaac looked back in a panic. "Welcome back." Lucas stood alone in the corner of the room, smiling with a face covered in blood. "It's been a long time, young master." Isaac jolted awake from the nightmare, cold sweat pouring down like a stream. He was alone in the cellar again. Lucas was dead. After coughing up blood and leaving, he hadn't returned for over a year. It was difficult for Isaac to even hear the news of his death from his father. On that day, another mana eruption occurred. He locked his door tight. Perhaps he had skipped meals many times. Isaac was plunged into extreme regret. He should have kept his distance. He kept blaming himself. He shouldn't have gotten attached. He should have been colder. Isaac couldn't stop the feeling of regret. If only he had done that, then everything. A few more years passed, and he didn't care to eat or drink. Yet he was still alive. Therefore, from now on, he had to move forward. The teenager from those years had become middle-aged, but his appearance was like an old man. In more than 30 years of living underground, Isaac poured his entire being into magical research to overcome this special constitution. And now, books had nothing left to teach him, only intuition and enlightenment remained. Isaac muttered as if self-hypnotizing, "You, the one who began the journey. You, the one who is lonely to the core, can you stand alone before the infinite of a desolate world where only mana and you exist? Awaken yourself." Many years passed, and he finally found a clue to overcome his condition. The quality of the meals seemed to be decreasing. Isaac was also a bit puzzled. Is something wrong with the family? He should remove the moldy layers before eating. Research documents continued to arrive, but when he sat back at the table, his eyes drifted up to the wall, marking the dates. Isaac was stunned for a moment. Am I 71 already? Just then footsteps echoed outside. Then an incredibly familiar sound followed, his brother. Jonas called out, "It's me, Jonas, are you sleeping?" Isaac was shocked and disbelieving. He hurried to the door. "Jonas, why are you here?" He was silent for a moment. Jonas tentatively opened the conversation. "Can I come in?" Isaac hurriedly kept his distance. "Just stand there and talk." The two were separated only by a door. "Are you doing well lately?" Jonas hesitated. "It's a long story." Jonas unexpectedly revealed, "Do you know, today is Father's death anniversary." He asked distractedly, "How did Father pass away?" Jonas carefully began, "It's a long story, do you want to hear it?" Isaac von Goethe replied, "If you don't mind." Jonas rewound to the past. Then it must start 30 years ago. That was when the War of Succession between the first prince and the second prince occurred. The two talked for a long time. It had been so long since he had spoken to anyone else. Isaac couldn't hide the joy in his eyes, feeling as though he had returned to his childhood. He genuinely praised him. "I have to admit one thing, you tell stories very well. I lost track of time without even knowing it." Jonas burst into hearty laughter. "Is that so? If I had known, I would have wandered the world and lived as a poet." He then mentioned, "Although with only one arm it probably wouldn't have been easy." Isaac was startled, feeling guilty. "I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry." Jonas said that everyone loved him very much. He poured out his heart. "What a pity. I wanted to see your face one last time, brother." Isaac was instantly horrified. "One last time." Jonas continued to explain. During the war, a portal had opened. Monsters from a strange world never before known, the extremist faction of the new church. The crimes they committed. Isaac hurriedly turned back to ask if his younger brother was okay. However, Jonas's consciousness seemed to become vague. He still muttered, "In this place, at least you live comfortably now, if only it had been a little sooner." At the same time, Isaac saw red blood begin to pool out from the gap in the door. Without thinking much, he hurried to open the door, only to be horrified to witness Jonas collapsed in a pool of blood. It seemed he had been severely wounded before arriving here. Even in critical condition, Jonas gritted his teeth, softly praising, "Amazing. You were able to tell such a long story. Let's go, we can't keep lying here." Isaac supported his younger brother. Both slowly began to move outside. As they walked, 2 streams of tears from Isaac's eyes did not stop flowing. "Oh God, why are you so light? How long have you been starving yourself?" When they neared the door, a blinding light suddenly shone directly inside. Isaac took a heavy, deep breath, then determinedly hugged his brother tightly and stepped outside. Outside was a tragic scene of ruin, as if they had just experienced a fierce battle. In the center of the main room lay the carcass of a giant monster. However, Isaac didn't care about such things. He reached out, touched a falling snowflake and muttered, "It's snowing, Jonas. The winter earth is frozen, I can't bury you right now." I will try to wait until spring to bury you in the family graveyard. And after that, I will rest too. Time gradually passed. Plants began to sprout. A butterfly landed on the hilt of a sword. Isaac had finished burying his relative. He clenched a stone. Isaac reached his hand out, and a bright burning flame appeared. He smiled with relief. Do you see, Jonas? Isaac von Goethe was deeply moved. Though it is late, I have finally done it. The stone in his hand shattered in two. After so many years of research, I have overcome this constitution. Isaac collapsed wearily. Now I can rest too, right? All these years he had always tormented himself. Can I be forgiven even a little? If I had been faster, if I hadn't wasted so much time in despair, would everything have changed? Isaac drew his last breath beside his family. Time passed and suddenly someone called out with concern. Young master, are you having a nightmare? He vaguely recognized this voice. No, Han passed away long ago. Blinding light shone in from the window. Isaac startled awake. He had become much younger. Han was pulling the curtains while asking, you are drenched in cold sweat, your face is pale too. He limped closer. Did you not sleep well? Isaac looked around suspiciously. Am I dreaming, or is this the final flash of life before death? Isaac slowly walked toward the window. There he heard the shouts of the servants. Jonas, it's dangerous, get down right now. In response was Jonas's youthful voice, it's fine. On a nearby tree branch, the young Jonas spotted Isaac watching him and happily waved, brother. Seeing that scene, Isaac's face remained blank, completely oblivious to what was happening. Meanwhile, his younger brother Jonas was still happily swinging from a tree branch. Isaac could only respond with an awkward smile. At that moment, he finally understood everything. This wasn't a dream, he had actually returned to the past. O traveler starting this journey, are you lonely enough to stand before the infinite? There is only Mana and you in this world. You must realize your true self, let go of your thoughts and cast aside all old-fashioned perspectives. Break free from the shackles of the past and return to your authentic self. Shards of pottery were scattered all over the room. The maids complained incessantly, this room is a mess. The young master is truly ungrateful, so short-tempered. When the master returns tomorrow, I'm quitting. They gossiped freely, perhaps thinking his worsening illness made him increasingly sensitive. Han grew furious and prepared to rush over. What are they saying? I'm going to teach them a lesson. Isaac held him back. That's enough, Han. He turned his head away in self-deprecation. They aren't wrong. Isaac couldn't bear it. You shouldn't keep visiting me anymore. Han, you were hurt just because you were near me today. He was heartbroken. Han knelt before him. Not at all, young master. He insisted, trying to comfort him. I still care for you, you are just going through a difficult phase right now. Han firmly believed it would pass, and that everything would be fine again soon. He smiled reassuringly. Isn't that just how life is? Just like that, Han, the man who once had such a radiant smile, eventually lost his life in a mono explosion caused by my own heart. Everyone who cared for me died because of this heart. Isaac blamed himself. No, it was I who killed them. Outside, Jonas was still calling out, Big brother, come play with me. Lyra added anxiously, please come down. Isaac finally steeled his resolve. If this was reality, he clenched his fists. He knew what he had to do and called out to Han. Han quickly answered, yes, young master. He ordered coldly, get out. Isaac shouted in anger, get out of my sight. For a brief moment, Han was stunned. Then he obeyed, as you wish. He had made up his mind that this would be better, as being near him only brought danger. Han paused for a second, looking as if he could see right through Isaac. Please do not try to carry everything on your own. Han urged him gently, sometimes you can trust us too. I don't remember him ever saying those words, or perhaps I'm still dreaming because I long to hear them. He swung his hand and slapped himself in the face. Isaac was stunned. That hurts. Is this really reality? If so, then how did I die before? He looked outside again. Isaac resolved that whether it was a dream or reality didn't matter. He had to stop himself from letting his mana explode ever again. In the past, there was a man who also had an abnormal constitution from birth, named Zeke von Goethe. He reached a realm no other human could, becoming a 10th circle archmage, and he was my ancestor many generations back. After investigating underground, I found the records he left behind, which helped me better understand how to utilize this special constitution. After years of meticulous research, I found a way to overcome it, and Isaac completed it quickly. This was the first step. Rune stones, the ultimate crystallization of my findings engraved on mana stones, then burned and fused to create them. He secretly marveled that his hands used to tremble with old age, but now it was so easy. it was good to be young again. To prevent the side effects of his abnormal constitution and the mana explosions, the mana container had to be able to withstand the chaotic flow inside. But his mana flowed too quickly and too violently for the container to handle. A normal person would die as soon as it shattered, but strangely, his container would always regenerate as if it had never been destroyed. Because of that, it could explode 10 or 20 times. Isaac couldn't help but tell himself that he was a walking disaster. This rune stone helped replace the mana circuits safely by applying constant vibrations to the damaged areas, thereby forming new circuits that disperse the impact of the violent mana flow. He pondered deeply, but the success rate was extremely low. Before he died, he had only succeeded once. Isaac remembered it vividly. That small flame was the proof. He started nervously, wondering if it would succeed this time. A violent flame flared up, but it was much larger than expected. Isaac was extremely surprised, yet he felt quite happy. This power, Isaac felt a sharp pain in his heart. The circuits reacted, and a stream of mana coursed through his entire body. Isaac was bewildered. The stone in his hand began to glow, and a small flame erupted from it. It grew larger and more intense. He realized joyfully, I knew it, the circuits have increased to 3. Isaac was stunned for a moment as each circuit had its own function and unique path, meaning he could now cast 3 spells simultaneously. It worked. He calmed himself down. No, this wasn't my goal. My goal is to stop any more mana explosions from happening. Therefore, 3 circuits are not enough. I must use magic more frequently to expand the circuits and reduce the burden on the mana container. Until I achieve that, I will not let anyone stay by my side. Time passed quickly, and it was already evening. Han arrived with a bright smile. It's time to eat, young master. He acted as if nothing was wrong. I have a cold meat sandwich. Isaac didn't know what else to say. I told you to leave already. Han didn't listen. You haven't been eating much lately. Please have a bite. He was completely helpless. The man wouldn't listen to a single word he said. Isaac couldn't understand it, and what was with this gentle, sweet tone? He was extremely persistent. I'll leave as soon as you take a bite. Hurry up. He tried to probe. Han, how old am I? Han replied immediately. You are 12 years old this year, young master. Isaac had no choice but to take a bite, thinking he should act like a normal child his age. He took a bite, and Isaac realized immediately that this sandwich must have been made by his nanny. It had been a long time since he tasted this flavor. He devoured the rest of his dinner. Isaac suddenly remembered, where is the nanny? I haven't seen her today. Han explained, yes, her son has pneumonia. He paused for a moment and set his spoon on the table, so she went back home. He remarked coldly, a nanny leaving her post for her child. In any other family, she wouldn't be allowed to keep working. This place truly is a kind family. Han's eyes widened in surprise, and the fire in the room crackled. Isaac sat in deep thought, and he instinctively clenched his fist. Isaac decided to ask, is Hinder the only one with pneumonia? He let out a sigh of relief. Han said no, all the children in that village were sick. He nodded in confirmation. I understand, I remember now. The epidemic broke out at this time, and Black Goose Village was the source. The nanny lost her son in this incident and lived the rest of her life in inconsolable grief. At the end of her life, Lyra had said, you've done well, young master. She had been gentle until the very end, telling him that he was the one who had to leave this time. Isaac whispered to himself, I don't want her to have to go through that ever again. He propped his chin up in thought, as the cause of the pneumonia was still a mystery. The meal was momentarily forgotten. Isaac changed his train of thought. Han. He jumped to his feet. Have any monsters been killed in that area recently? Late one night, a large deer was wandering through the forest. Suddenly, it startled as it sensed danger. A fireball unexpectedly struck the deer. It scrambled to run away. Isaac slowly approached. He looked disappointed. I really thought it was a wolf. Isaac continued deeper into the forest. He was heading straight toward Black Goose Village. Not long before, Han had been surprised by Isaac's question. A monster hunted in Black Goose Village. He tried to remember. I couldn't see it very clearly myself, but someone from the magic tower came here to buy its carcass for research materials. Han hadn't paid much attention at the time. I did take a quick look though. He described it clearly. It looked exactly like a giant spider covered in silver hair. He quickly narrowed down the target. If Han's description was accurate, the monster was definitely, Isaac confirmed firmly, a winter spider. Winter spiders weren't particularly strong monsters, but they often formed large swarms due to their incredible reproductive speed. The real problem lay in the amount of mana these creatures possessed. If one came into contact with high-density mana, the body would suffer from mana poisoning, causing the victim to slowly suffocate. Back in reality, he was collecting a large amount of medicinal herbs. Isaac worked tirelessly, as the children in Black Goose Village must have been poisoned by the mana emitted by the winter spiders. His bag was soon full, and Isaac had found his reason. But in this era, knowledge about mana poisoning was very limited, which was why they mistook the illness for pneumonia. He checked his basket, deciding he had enough herbs. Giving this to the children would help alleviate their symptoms. Isaac knew how to deal with this illness, though the cure would only be temporary. To prevent the sickness from recurring, the swarm of monsters had to be completely eradicated. I could ask for help from my parents, but my father is constantly stationed at the border fortress, and my mother is busy traveling across the continent, trying to find a cure for my special constitution. He told himself, if I just sit around waiting for them, Hinder's life will be in critical danger again. Isaac quickly arrived at the village, and he headed straight to the nanny's house. Lyra was sitting anxiously by the sickbed. She startled when she heard the noise. Lyra opened the door cautiously. Who is it? She was stunned with surprise. Isaac pulled down his hood. You look exhausted, Nanny. Lyra gasped in shock. Young master. She asked anxiously, why are you here at this hour, and what happened to your clothes? Is everything all right at the mansion? Lyra carefully wiped the dust from his face. Oh my goodness, you're covered in mud. Isaac was touched. He stepped inside. You haven't been to work for several days, so I just dropped by to see how you were doing. She started to block him. Wait, you can't come in. Lyra was afraid Isaac would catch the sickness. They say Hinder has pneumonia, what if you get infected? He took out a mask and put it on. Is this enough? She was still worried. But sir. Isaac handed a large bag to Lyra. Don't worry about that, just take this. She asked blankly, what is this? He replied briefly. It's herbs, either crushed or chopped, mix them, boil them in a pot twice, let them cool and have him drink it. Isaac walked straight into the back room, and he stood by the sickbed to observe. Isaac immediately concluded, these blue and purple spots are definitely mana poisoning. He shook the patient. Hinder, can you hear me? He struggled to lift his eyelids. Hinder woke up and immediately pleaded. Isaac, no, please, young master, don't fire my mother. Even while coughing, he tried to explain. Mom can't go to work because of me, it's all because I'm sick. Isaac immediately assured him, I won't fire her. He checked Hinder's body temperature. Your mother is the only one who secretly brought me barley bread after all. Time passed quickly until the next morning when he was led by the physician. This was the abandoned mine he had been looking for. Isaac peered inside. Are you sure this is a limestone cave? It's really dark in here. He stated firmly, yes, I am certain. He offered a gold coin as payment. Thanks, this is far enough, leave the rest to me. Ethan looked back to warn him, be careful, people have gone missing around this area before. Isaac replied while walking, thank you for the warning. He had already ruled out other areas. Winter spiders usually prefer limestone caves. Since this was the only limestone cave in the region, it was highly likely to be their nest. Isaac had made prior preparations. Before stepping inside, flashes of light flickered around him. Need to prepare a little first. Last time, thanks to opening new pathways in his mana system, he was able to cast 3 types of magic simultaneously. With this ability, the output could rival a second-tier spell. However, everything has its limits. If he overexerted himself, his mana container could shatter into pieces. Isaac calculated very carefully. Since he didn't know how many winter spiders were inside, he couldn't just use magic recklessly. That was the reason why he needed this. The nightshade plant. Normally, its fruit is diluted to be used as an anesthetic or sedative. It looked exactly like what was described in the books, but to winter spiders this was a deadly poison. He firmly pulled them up. It's ridiculous that they live in the same environment as their own fatal weakness. How ironic. Time passed quickly until noon, and Isaac had a bag full of poison. His hands ached. I should have at least brought gloves, the toxicity is really strong. Isaac felt ready. All right, that preparation is enough. I've already crafted plenty of rune stones at the mansion, so it's time to head out. He ventured deeper inside, and the cave became darker with every step. Isaac stopped in front of a steep cliff, with strong winds blowing up toward where he stood. Losing my life in a place like this would be a truly meaningless death. Isaac looked around, searching. It seems to be right down below, but how do I get down there? He just happened to spot a rope ladder that looked like it was still in fairly good condition. Isaac was a bit tense, but he didn't hesitate for long. Isaac followed the ladder down, and he landed safely on the lower level. Isaac was so tired his limbs were trembling, and he frowned deeply. Looks like I've found the right place. In front of Isaac lay piles of dry bones, with corpses stacked on the floor. looking as if all their bodily fluids had been drained away. And this here was a human collarbone. Could these be the missing people the hunter mentioned? A screeching sound echoed near him. Isaac jumped in fright, and the oppressive aura grew closer and closer. He cautiously prepared to confront it, the mana in his hands surging with greater power. He was ready to fight. Isaac launched a fireball toward the winter spiders, and he successfully created a safe zone. These creatures were terrified of fire, so this would help scare them off for a while. Isaac unloaded his things. I need to be ready before they surround me. He covered his nose and mouth. Isaac took out the poison, and he focused intently. Isaac set his eyes on the target. First, the medicinal herbs. He decisively set the bag of poison on fire, and a faint toxic scent spread through the air. The winter spiders seemed to slow down. This was Isaac's chance. All right, let the hunt begin. Flashback to a time in his previous life. Inside a study, Isaac was working at his desk. Suddenly, a loud voice rang out. What on earth did you do to let things get this bad? He stopped, walking to the window to look down. Down below, 3 people were arguing. Watch your tongue, you are standing before the noble lord. Who in this place doesn't know about that? Liam shouted angrily. I am currently questioning the master of this land about why you failed to protect your own people. Why did you abandon the Black Crow village like that? Why? The other person suddenly barked. Shut your mouth. He turned and headed to a seat. How noisy. Maybe I should tell them to use boards to seal up those windows. Or maybe I should just move down to the basement. Down there it's quiet and there's no one passing by. That way I can focus on researching my special constitution better. By the way, I should cover the walls with Marium as it's a mineral with high magic resistance. It will be very helpful when dealing with mana explosions. Isaac looked up and asked, what do you think, Han? The room was empty, there was no one but him. Isaac stared blankly, and he softly spoke, oh that's right, Han has. Isaac bowed his head and diligently kept writing. A scratching sound filled the air and the room became silent again. His writing speed increased. Isaac's eyes widened as he looked down, and he wrote with even more fervor. His eyes opened wide in a frightening way. The room was filled only with the sound of the pen moving. At this moment in a cave, Isaac sat silently in contemplation. He looked up and quietly asked, why do I keep dwelling on these old memories? The winter spiders seem to be succumbing to the frozen poison quite well. I can't feed those monsters the poison directly. But if I burn it and let the smoke spread like this, their bodies will gradually become paralyzed until they suffocate and die. Of course, he himself wasn't safe from that smoke. That was why he had to wrap a wet handkerchief around his face as a primary filter, and then use the mana inside his body to purify the rest. At the same time, he created a small fireball and used phase shifting to maintain vigilance. Purification, pyromancy, and phase shifting, 3 types of magic cast simultaneously through 3 mana pathways, also known as multi-circuit casting. Thanks to that, he was able to buy time until the spiders grew weak. Isaac pointed his finger forward. Goodbye. A massive explosion occurred. He strolled leisurely through the sea of fire. Suddenly, Isaac sensed something. He pondered, it seems all of them are fleeing in the same direction. A glint appeared in Isaac's eyes. Looks like there's a water source over there. He picked up his pace. Isaac's clothes unexpectedly caught fire, and he hurriedly took them off. This stuff catches fire really easily, but if this keeps up, I'll suffocate from the smoke, plus it's getting way too hot. Isaac threw his shirt on the ground. Must end this quickly. By night, the cave became chilly. He followed the flow of the water. Isaac shivered, hugging himself. It's freezing in here, I shouldn't have thrown away my coat. He hadn't expected the temperature to drop so low that it began to freeze. He unexpectedly looked up. Wait a minute. Above Isaac was a nest of eggs. Are they all eggs? If it lays this many eggs, could it be? Suddenly a sound rang out, and he was startled by the noise. Isaac hurried to turn around and look. His eyes wide. The eggs were gradually falling down. He regained his composure and raised his hand. Isaac unleashed flames forward. The flapping sound of fire echoed. He was stunned to see the scene. A drop of sweat rolled down Isaac's cheek. A giant spider suddenly appeared behind him. Isaac sensed it immediately. It just lunged, and he already darted away. Isaac lunged forward to dodge. He turned to look back. Damn it, why are those gut feelings of mine never wrong? Isaac was stunned to see it was the winter spider queen, vastly different from her kin. It was a monster capable of resisting fire and carrying the breath of frost. That was the reason they were called that, winter spiders. The spider quickly lunged toward him. He hurriedly stood up to attack. A flame smashed into its leg. Isaac gritted his teeth and thought, as expected, just a few fireballs aren't enough to set it ablaze like the others. The only consolation was that its movements weren't too flexible. Suddenly a wave of pain hit him. My body is gradually reaching its limit. For a 12-year-old body with no real combat experience, it was only natural for staying up all night and using magic all day to lead to this state. While Isaac was deep in thought, the spider advanced. He struggled to lift his head. Isaac's eyes narrowed slightly. Images from the past flashed before him. Oh, the barley bread that Han brought was truly delicious. In this desolate northern region where even wheat couldn't grow, the reason he was able to eat soft white bread was all thanks to his nanny. Because he was a picky eater who hated black bread, she had gone out of her way to travel to a faraway city every week to buy the finest type of wheat. Isaac suddenly smirked. When I get back, I have to ask her to make plenty of it. He pulled out his shovel. Even if it's a queen spider, it's still just an arthropod in the end. Isaac took off his backpack as well. The backpack dangled from his hand and then shattered with a crash. The spider's eyes turned blood red. He held the shovel and ran straight toward it. His face became more serious. The shovel plunged straight into the spider's eye, and a stream of blue blood spurted out. Its screech of pain echoed. Isaac gritted his teeth and retreated. He slid under the spider's belly, grabbing one of its legs with one hand. A loud noise rang out, and both of them fell. Isaac scraped against the ground, having to hold on at all costs. I still lack the accuracy to shoot them, and I don't have enough energy left to keep casting fireballs. Even if I'm lucky enough to hit, I can't deliver a fatal blow to a fire-resistant creature. In that case, I'm forced to give up on long-range attacks. This was completely different from the fireballs earlier. Initialize, compress, and then. A loud scream echoed in his head. Condense it a little more. Isaac furrowed his brows and spoke with fury. He swung his hand, landing a heavy punch on it. Die. A large section of the spider's back was instantly frozen solid. He immediately sensed it lunging at him. A cry of pure agony echoed throughout the cave. It rolled back and forth on the ground. Isaac reached out, trying to retrieve the item. I have to pull my hand out now, but it kept shuddering so violently that he couldn't manage it. His hand was drenched in blood. Isaac let out a sigh of relief, got it out. A moment later, they both lay sprawled on the ground, the spider's body still burning. A stone fell out from inside it. The stone looked exactly like a jewel. He slowly opened his eyes. Where am I? A loud, noisy argument broke out. Did you report to them that the young master snuck out of the mansion? Was that voice the nanny? How could I dare say a word? If that got out, it would be complete chaos. Is that Han? Han spoke back, confused. But do you really know nothing? Isn't it said that the young master traveled all the way to that abandoned mine? Lyra clutched her face with one hand. I don't know either. A local hunter guided him there, but the man has been busy hunting since then, so he doesn't know the specifics either. Right, I defeated the Winter Spider Queen and passed out after hitting my head on the ground. Luckily, I woke up right after and managed to drag myself out of the ruined mine to return to the village. Afterward, I ran into Han lingering at the village entrance. He saw me collapse, panicked, and then he just fainted. Isaac slowly opened his eyes. That's right, thanks to doing exactly as the young master instructed, young Hinder had fully recovered. Han smiled gently. The young master's true nature has always been that way. Truly, after the mana explosion, he has become a bit more sensitive, but how could that kind heart of his ever change? Hearing this, he felt embarrassed. Isaac sat up abruptly. Han looked over in a hurry. Young master, are you awake? He asked. How long have I been asleep? Han replied. You've been asleep for about half a day, young master. How are you feeling? I'm fine, it's still within my tolerance. She scolded him with a hint of anger. What do you mean, within your tolerance? Why did you go to such a dangerous place all by yourself? Isaac was silent for a moment before saying, I just accidentally fell while picking some herbs nearby. Even if I told them a 12-year-old killed a monster, they would just think I was delirious. It's better to just make up some excuse. Anyway, how is Hinder doing? Lyra sighed. Thanks to the herbs you provided, he's progressing much better. The same goes for the other children in the village. He tilted his head and smiled with relief. It's best to keep the mana poisoning a secret. If the higher-ups find out, the Council of Scholars will interfere immediately. Are all the winter spiders dead? Who could have done such a thing? It would be troublesome if the spider carcasses in the mine were discovered. She asked in surprise, but how do you know so much about those herbs? Even the doctor sent by the Lord had no idea. Isaac immediately turned away. I just happened to read about them in some books. Don't bring that up again, it's time to go, Han. He was confused to hear that. Right now, it's snowing quite heavily outside. He turned and got off the bed. If it's revealed that I snuck out of the mansion, your fate won't be very pleasant either, wouldn't you agree? Lyra brought a basket of fruit to Isaac. Please take these as well. The villagers asked me to gift them to you to express their gratitude. He picked up one of the fruits and looked at it. Nanny, you should take another week of rest. Won't you be able to work with peace of mind only when Hinder has fully recovered? She asked, feeling a bit awkward. Would that be all right? The head butler certainly won't take that sitting down. Isaac suddenly said something cryptic. Who said I was only letting you rest? He held up an apple and ordered, use these to make jam. She asked back, apple jam? Isaac took a bite and replied, yes, to have with the barley bread on the day you return to work. Lyra looked dazed for a moment, then she smiled, tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. Lyra added softly, could I also make an apple pie? He smiled and praised her, that sounds great. In the morning the sky was clear and sunny. At a large mansion, Isaac was running and breathing. A week had passed and his speed was incredibly fast. During that time, his mana circuits had also undergone a transformation. The 3 mana circulation rings had increased by 1, bringing the total to 4. Because of this, the mana circuits became significantly more stable. The number of spells I can cast simultaneously has also increased to 4 layers. Fighting the winter spiders and pushing myself to the limit must have helped a lot. The effort put into running hard every day certainly contributed a great deal. Using magic requires thorough calculation and keen intuition. It is a process that consumes a lot of mental energy. When the body is exhausted, the mind will collapse as well. A clear mind requires physical endurance as a foundation. The reason I quickly reached my limit in that abandoned mine was due to this young, unrefined body. In my previous life, Lucas used to train my physical strength regularly. The image of Lucas smiling appeared, and his face suddenly turned somber. A sudden call rang out, young master. Schiller brought Andrian over. Today is your scheduled health checkup, sir. He stopped and wiped his sweat. It was the head butler Schiller and the doctor. Andrian placed a hand on his chest and smiled brightly. Greetings, young master, how are you feeling today? This was the doctor assigned by his father, known as the most renowned physician in the surrounding regions. But even he didn't fully understand his condition. Andrian stepped forward to observe. It seems there are no serious problems today. In fact, you look healthier than ever. I will start adjusting your prescription. Isaac thought indifferently. Is he just going to jump to conclusions like that? He opened his case. Inside were 6 vials of medicine. This is a medicinal herb called panacea. It helps stabilize the flow of mana. Isaac picked up a vial and looked at it. Panacea, father really went out of his way to find me some top-tier goods. In common parlance, panacea is understood as a cure-all. For some, it is used as a stimulant and an energy booster for soldiers. Although this drug is known for its ability to stabilize mana flow to make it run smoother, that is actually a misconception that arose during the translation of ancient texts. Its true effect is to stimulate mana flow. In other words, it is no different from poison to someone like me who has lost control of his mana. However, with the current situation, it will act as a suitable catalyst. If used properly, it will help me increase my mana circulation rings. Then I will see you next month. All right, you've worked hard. After the conversation, Andrian left. He turned around and saw Schiller watching him. Isaac asked, do you have something to say? Schiller replied, you seem quite calm today. Don't you usually fly into a rage when being examined? That's also why all the doctors in the affiliated territory refuse to be your personal physician. He laughed upon hearing the question. Is that so? Should I have gotten angry? Schiller was silent for a moment before his lips moved. The next sentence left him stunned. I heard you cured the children in Black Goose Village of pneumonia. Isaac asked calmly, you know about that too? Schiller replied frankly, I just heard it from Han. He thought to himself, so you interrogated Han. His face grew angry. If this were to go public, the advisory council certainly wouldn't take it lightly. I will overlook it this time. He bowed his head and whispered, but from now on, I hope you will learn to exercise more restraint. Schiller's eyes stared at him coldly. A long time ago, I was never able to be close to Schiller. He was always a dry, rigid head butler, a cold old man, always keeping a distance from everyone. Schiller unexpectedly picked up Isaac's suitcase. If you truly cannot help yourself, he said, taking it, then at least discuss it with me first. He was surprised by that scene as well. According to Jonas's account just before his death, Schiller, who had served the von Goethe family since the days of the previous head, remained at his post until the von Goethe house collapsed. And then he sacrificed his own life. He had actually always cared deeply for this family. Isaac nodded and smiled. I understand, thank you, Schiller. He only remained silent. Schiller thought for a moment and asked, By the way, are you still jogging every day? Is there a special reason for that? He tilted his head and glanced at him. Throughout history, every mage who reached the fifth circle or higher rigorously trained their bodies. If it is a body meant to conduct mana, doesn't it need a corresponding physical foundation? Schiller's eyes widened in surprise. That evening, word reached a room that the young master had definitively cured the children's pneumonia in Black Goose Village. The verification process is complete. Given this physical condition, it will be difficult for the young master to use magic in the future. However, I humbly suggest that the path of becoming a scholar or an alchemist might suit him. With this, his lordship will surely be relieved of some of his worries. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Come in. A maid entered. Excuse me, sir. Schiller looked up. Rosa, it's you again. She replied with a hint of fear. Please forgive me, head butler. The maids keep disappearing and never return. I don't know about Clara's case, but as for Annette, she was a very hardworking girl who hadn't taken a single day off in the past 3 years. Rosa's eyes turned red. I am sure that something terrible must have happened to her. In some corner, the servants were talking to each other. Isn't this strange? In just 2 short months, 3 maids have gone missing. You think so? The Von Goth region was never an easy place to live anyway. Bill said smugly, because it's deep in the north, the weather is extremely harsh. On top of that, bandits and monsters are constantly harassing us. Lily pointed at him. So you mean you're planning to pack up and run away too? Hey, I'm just making an assumption. She lowered her head and said, but at least Annette isn't the type to suddenly vanish without a word. How hard she worked to earn money for her father's medicine. Bill scoffed in rebuttal. Maybe she got sick of the scene of taking care of her sick father. Who knows, maybe she ran off with some lover. Rosa and Lily grew angry upon hearing this. Watch your mouth. Bill spread his arms and said calmly, just kidding. Actually, I have my own theory. I don't care if you want to listen, but listen anyway. Come on. Bill suddenly put on a frightening look. In my opinion, it's like this. A bold thought appeared in his head. Could it be dark magic? The 2 girls were dazed. Dark magic, he immediately said. What else? After all, this is the mansion of a mage family, right? Not to mention the young master's condition hasn't been very promising lately. If you were the owner of this house, would you be willing to use magic at any cost? Lily blurted out, you mean those missing girls were taken away as human sacrifices? Rosa screamed. What the hell are you rambling about, Bill? If you dare to weave such bizarre rumors again, I won't let it slide. He continued to speak. And if you won't let it slide, what will you do? I might be right, you know. Rosa shouted angrily, the master is not that kind of person. He even generously took in a sinner like you. Bill was still stubborn. What? After all that, now you're starting to yell too. Behind his back, a voice made him jump. This story sounds truly interesting. Isaac crossed his arms and looked at Bill, asking, why don't you tell me the details? He replied with fear, it started 2 months ago, sir. Bill looked elsewhere. First, the maid Hulda suddenly disappeared. Then a few weeks later, it was Clara's turn and there was no sign of her either. Finally, at the end of this week, Annette went to mass and then vanished without returning. The room fell silent. He asked coldly, do you know why? Bill thought for a moment before speaking, why does a child have such a terrifying look in his eyes? Well, sir, I'm not really sure about that. Isaac immediately said, just be honest, I promise I won't hold you accountable for this. He asked back in surprise, are you serious, young master? My words are always the truth. Bill bowed his head in silence. Isaac suddenly asked, making him confused, do you think I'm the cause of this? Isn't that already obvious? Look at Han, he is your closest servant, yet his body is always covered in cuts and bruises. That guy is always moaning in pain, I'm not sure. Those who cannot have a peaceful death, the probability is high that it's him. I shouldn't have opened my mouth. Isaac called out in a low voice, Bill. He begged in fear, please spare my life, young master. I haven't even had the chance to take a wife, nor do I have a single child. The priest once said life is a gift from God. He looked at Bill calmly. You don't want to die, do you? Isaac extended his hand and proposed, then serve me to atone for your sins. He stopped begging. The sky was dark, the wind rustled. A blue flame hovered in the air. Isaac sat on the bed looking up at the sky. Rosa, Annette. The image of the 2 girls appeared in the fire. He said with an indifferent expression, that's right, those were their names. Ever since Han and my nanny passed away, they were the only maids who volunteered to stay and serve me. The bottle of medicine fell to the ground and shattered. A small drop of blood dripped down. Isaac waved his hand and ordered, both of you leave, I want to be alone. The 2 maids were terrified. But young master, what about your hand? He immediately shouted, didn't you hear me tell you to get out? These medicines are useless anyway. Don't ever bring them here again. Rosa, though frightened, tried to speak. But young master, please don't lose hope so soon. Everything will be all right, surely. His face darkened, his voice ice cold. Hope. How could you ever understand the feeling of taking the life of the person you love most with your own hands? Isaac's fist tightened. Can you even imagine that kind of pain? She looked at him in confusion. Young master. Annette stepped forward and said, I understand. I too caused my friend to lose her life with these very hands. Hearing this, he lowered his voice. Your friend. Rosa glanced down. Annette continued. Back then, if only I had turned back to look at Clara even once. If I had reached out in time, perhaps I could have saved her. After speaking, Annette walked over to Isaac. She looked down at him. I know your situation is unique, young master, but in this world, anyone can end up doing things against their will. Isaac frowned at Annette. She continued to look at him. At least once in a lifetime, that could happen to anyone. At that moment, Annette's own pessimism brought me a strange sense of comfort. Returning to the present, I really should have asked her more about that back then. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and a voice called out from outside. Excuse me, young master, it's Bill. Sitting on the bed, he asked, Did you find the trail of those maids yet? He quickly replied, Yes, I did. It didn't take me long to find them at all. I went around asking the beggars along the main roads, and their stories all matched up perfectly. After hearing this, Isaac asked further, So what's the result? Bill explained clearly, It turns out it's all the work of human traffickers. They use sweet promises to lure people to the prosperous south, then secretly sell them off. He was puzzled upon hearing this. If they want to go south, they can go on their own. Why is it necessary to go through brokers? He raised his hand and smirked. Young master, you still don't quite grasp how the world works. There's the cost of transportation for a long, grueling journey south, hiring mercenaries to protect them from bandits along the way, and then there's the paperwork to establish a free identity once they arrive. Do you honestly think a group of weak, defenseless women could manage all that on their own? Isaac rested his chin on his hand and thought, I see, that makes sense. Bill sighed to himself. Kids will always be kids. This brat knows absolutely nothing about the real world. A thought suddenly popped into Bill's head. Wait, could this be? He suddenly spoke up. I had to pay a hefty sum to get those beggars to spill the beans. Because of that, I've spent all the travel money you gave me. Please, young master, give me a little more. He asked back in disbelief. All 20 silver coins, that's equivalent to half a year's wages. Bill laughed loudly in response, which made Isaac think to himself, It's just because everyone is being too cautious. He spoke, That little bit of money is no problem. What I need is to find them as quickly as possible. He beamed with joy upon hearing the answer. Oh my, you really are generous, young master. Is there anything else you need me to do? Isaac replied, Yes, there is. I will ensure you are well rewarded for this job. Do you want to try? Bill clenched his fist excitedly. Of course. He thought he had caught a fat goose this time. Sure enough, in this life, all you need is a silver tongue to live well. If I can lead this brat by the nose, I'll definitely be making tons of money from now on. This really is a golden goose that just showed itself. The only drawback is that this kid is like a ticking time bomb, but oh well, if you don't take risks, how can you hit the jackpot? He was thrilled and told him, I can lead you to the broker right away. His inner laughter grew louder and louder. That's life, you've got to gamble to win big. Then he stood behind the bars, looking bewildered. Inside, it was full of skulls and dust, and he was left wearing only his shorts. Bill clutched the iron bars and screamed, How did things turn out like this? Isaac stood in a corner watching him. Why do I have to be in this hellhole? He held a stone in his hand and curled his lip into a smile. In the dungeon, there was a small canal running through the middle. His hand gripping the iron frame trembled. Bill gnashed his teeth in anger. Damn it, how did it come to this? He recalled what happened before. Everything was still fine when he had secretly taken the young master out of the mansion to the city of Bern. Meeting the broker to take the maids was easy too. He claimed to be a noble heading south. However, at that moment, the broker's expression suddenly turned dark, but his eyes swept over Isaac's fine, high-quality clothing. And then he looked at that clean, beautiful face. A sly smile spread across the broker's face. I understand why the young master is an easy target for traffickers. After all, the young master does have a pleasing face. Bill thought of his own body being stripped down to his underwear. But why did I end up like this? He grimaced and turned back. What's more, young Master Isaac doesn't even look harmed yet, meaning they didn't even dare to touch a single hair on his head because he was high-quality goods, and unlike in the book at all, he was even focusing on his own business. Do I need to condense the mana a bit more? Bill was absolutely furious while I had been stripped clean from head to toe except for my underwear. Unable to stand it anymore, he shouted, "So what do I do now? I've already come this far, you must have some sort of plan, right, don't you?" Bill frantically questioned, "Stop playing with that rock, say something." Isaac calmly reminded him, "Where did all your manners go?" But he no longer cared. "Can you still talk about manners when you're in my position? We're about to die." Isaac sighed, "I'm going to find Annette and the others." Bill nodded, "Of course you have to. If you have a way to get out of these bars." Suddenly he raised his hand. Behind him there was a vibrating sound. Immediately after, a hole was gouged out of the iron frame, and it fell away. Bill's expression instantly turned to shock. He began to change his tone, calling out softly, "Young master." Bill put on a flattering smile. "You won't leave me here, right?" Isaac replied nonchalantly. "Don't you even know me?" he pleaded. "Come on, don't be like that." His voice drifted outside. This place was like a maze. The two guards began to grow wary. "What's that sound? Let's go check it out." Bill was still trying to scare him. "You might get lost and be surrounded by robbers." "Who knew?" Isaac turned sharply to leave. "You think I can't handle that many? Fine then, I'm leaving. Good luck." "Wait, young master," he yelled in a panic. He stopped in his tracks and turned his head. Bill suddenly fell to his knees on the ground. He begged desperately, "Please save me, please, I'll do anything, anything." His footsteps paused. Isaac's eyes were covered in a layer of deep thought. He thought to himself, "You know what, Bill? I've seen you do this before." Memories of the past overlapped. "Please save my life, young master." Back then, he had also begged like this. "I truly lost my mind. I shouldn't have done that when you were so kind to take me in, sir." Isaac was stern. "Bill, you used to be a bandit. When Isaac overwhelmed the bandits, you survived by handing over information about your organization. But this time you betrayed the Von Goth house." He decided, "So I can't trust you anymore." He, terrified, tried to beg for mercy. "Sir, please spare me just this once." Schiller couldn't take it and shouted, "Enough." He questioned him directly. "Do you think the crime of trying to sell Von Goth's secret books to a criminal organization can be taken lightly?" Bill cried uncontrollably. "Please, I beg you, I will never betray you again." But in the end, that sword was lowered to finish him off. Isaac said, "You would have been quite useful if you hadn't been so greedy." Isaac's face was expressionless. "I still vaguely remember that day." With a bandit used to the underworld economy, Bill had found the servants using what he knew. And perhaps spending all those silver coins was also a lie of his. He mused, "If my memory serves me right, the criminal organization Bill tried to sell the secret books to in my previous life is also the one that kidnapped the servants. Now those bastards have expanded their power through human trafficking and will quickly spread in Von Goth like mold, and then they will torture people. Anything that could be a threat to the family must definitely be destroyed first." At this moment he pulled a scroll from his shirt. "You said you would do anything, right?" He held it out in front of Bill. "Then I have this for you to do first." In the dim, shadowy room, next to the dining table, several men were standing in line. One was cutting meat on a plate. "Father, you're not eating anything again." He put a piece of meat into his mouth. The guards turned pale, covering their mouths as they listened. "Please eat something, Father. How can I stand to see you getting thinner by the day like this?" News raised his fork, pointing forward. "The one inside, is it you?" Opposite him was a skull hanging on a wooden stake. "Wait a little longer, by the time I succeed with dark magic we'll meet again." He sighed in sorrow. "You aren't answering again. Has your soul grown weak?" Suddenly News asked one of the men standing nearby, "Hey, where's my bathwater?" He stammered that the only people left now were the stock waiting to be sold. Suddenly a large hand slammed down. News lifted him high into the air, and red blood began to gush out. The others heard him say in terror, "Just one of these is probably enough for my bath, right?" News glanced at them. "I'll wait." The subordinate immediately replied, "I'll have it ready right away." Then he left. The room was now left with only two people and a corpse. One man held his head and sighed, "Damn dark magic. How many times has this been? In that bastard's food, in his bathwater. Next time just give him the stock we're supposed to sell, otherwise we'll all be dead." He stood up and flipped the corpse. "Stop complaining and take care of him properly." Suddenly a noise was heard. Two people curiously peered out the door, but the dark hallway was empty. They glanced at each other. Suddenly the expressions of both turned panic. The noise made them afraid. What was that sound? Their faces were no longer calm. Someone quietly swallowed hard. Suddenly something appeared. News's full head of hair rolled to their feet. Immediately after, News's blood-covered, wide-eyed face appeared. Both were instantly terrified. The great fear made their legs unable to stand steady. Just then a figure approached. He held a bloody blade. "Give me some water." Their faces were pale. "Are you Bill?" He gave a slight smirk. The bloodied appearance terrified them. Bill smoothed his hair and repeated, "Give me a cup of water, you bastard." Before that, Isaac held out a piece of paper in front of him. "You said you would do anything, right? Then do this first." Bill was bewildered. "What is this?" He replied, "What else? This is a contract." Isaac summarized quickly. Article 1, the Bill side must comply with all orders of Party A, Isaac, unconditionally. Article 2, the Bill side must not disclose any information related to Party A, Isaac. Finally, he emphasized, Article 3, if Party B violates any of the conditions, the penalty is death. Bill's face became panicked. "Wait, what kind of condition is that?" He didn't know where he pulled a knife from. "You will sign it with blood. That's the only way for the magic to take effect." "Great, this will get the job done." He then struggled. "Are you crazy? How can I sign that?" Suddenly a voice approached. "Who's there?" Isaac smiled lightly, reminding him, "Come on, I don't have much time." He hit his weak spot. "Don't you want to live?" Outside, footsteps were rapidly approaching. In front of him was the dangerous contract. The sound of thick soles running on the stone floor became clearer. Bill angrily closed his eyes and grimaced. Suddenly he struck hard, making the knife fall. "Damn it." Next, Bill gritted his teeth and cut his fingertip. Then he didn't hesitate to press it onto the paper. Once finished, the contract suddenly glowed. The corner of his mouth curved into a slight smile. Just then the guards arrived. "Who are you? How did you get out?" Bill shouted in a panic, "They're here." Immediately after, the three of them were struck in the face, and they all instantly collapsed to the ground. He asked in confusion, "Are they dead?" Isaac explained, "They're just knocked out." Bill still couldn't understand how that was possible. Suddenly the ice stone in his hand caught his eye. He stared blankly at the magic. The two of them walked to another room outside the prison. Bill held a knife and led the way. He forced a laugh to strike up a conversation. "This is my first time seeing ice magic. You're truly amazing." But Isaac didn't think much of it, which was understandable, as ice magic wasn't very practical. He asked in surprise, "It's nothing," he replied dismissively. "It just looks that way." Suddenly Bill paused. He whispered a warning, "Bandits, two of them hiding by the nearby wall. Tell me what to do." "Bill, what do you need to make ice?" "That's a sudden question," he urged. "Guess." He hesitated for a moment before answering, "Wait, water." Isaac manipulated a small dab of water. "Exactly. Whether it's the humidity in the air or a puddle on the ground, you have to shape the water into the desired form." The stream of water swirled and followed the sequence of compression, condensation, expansion, and evaporation. It must undergo these 4 states. He continued to explain diligently, "Adjusting each state individually is easy, but deploying them sequentially is not." Bill looked toward the jailer impatiently. "We're going to get caught, hurry up." One of them yawned and suddenly noticed something. Before he could react, he saw Isaac rushing toward him. "Who are you guys?" He calmly tapped his hand and finally, a large water sphere suddenly flew toward them. The other man's face went stiff. Immediately after, he was attacked as the magic shifted phases. He pulled the water sphere back, as all these steps made this type of magic impractical in battle. Isaac glanced down. "If I didn't have this magic, I wouldn't bother using it." In his hand, he held the ice stone. "I found it on the carcass of the winter spider queen. Even though this magic isn't common, the ice stone has a certain academic value, so it's worth quite a bit," he thought to himself. It really was an unexpectedly good find. Bill walked over to check on the jailer. "If ice magic is so inconvenient, why use it?" He was unconscious. He explained, "Because it's not common, very few people know about it. It's hard to distinguish from injuries caused by blunt force, and since the ice melts, it leaves no traces, making this magic perfect for committing crimes stealthily." That cold, dark expression made Bill flinch. He whispered, "Aren't you going to finish them off?" At that moment, 2 others spotted them. "Who are they? How did they get out?" Isaac replied, "Even if I killed them, they would just be replaced soon." He hid behind his back. "But wouldn't they end up doing these things anyway?" Isaac replied while taking action. "That is exactly why I'm keeping them alive." The 2 who just arrived were knocked out. His eyebrows furrowed slightly. "I'll only kill." Strange footsteps appeared in his field of vision. His vigilance began to heighten. The massive figure of News approached alone. He looked at them skeptically. "You guys." Bill panicked and shouted, "News." He hurriedly reported, "Young master, he is the leader of that gang. He's delusional enough to think he can rip people apart with his bare hands." He asked back, "Is that so?" But Isaac wasn't worried. At least it saves me the trouble of searching. The water sphere began to emit a soft light. Then an ice spike was created. He controlled it to launch toward him. News opened his eyes wide as he was about to be impaled. Unexpectedly, he swung his arm and swatted it away. Bill gasped in astonishment. He blocked the ice with his bare hand. Isaac was also somewhat surprised. "You've got some strength. Which tribe are you from?" He grumbled in reproach. Is this really the time to compliment him? What do I do now? I'm going to be torn into 100 pieces. Suddenly News spoke up. Hey you guys. He laughed happily. Are you goods? I was worried I didn't have enough water for a bath. Lucky me. News's gaze fixed on Isaac. And a mage too, you will be excellent material for my dark magic. Bill began to panic. Wait, spare me please, it wasn't me. He slowly reached out his hand. He clutched his head and begged in fear. I'm just a normal person. Suddenly his finger froze. Bill opened his eyes in confusion. The sight of the ice block behind him launching a long ice spike that pierced his chest caught his eye. Confusion, the ice block he had blocked earlier. At this moment, Isaac was still in his casting stance. News coughed up some blood. Seeing him collapse, he finally called out to Bill. Isaac looked into his eyes and declared, "From now on, you are the leader of this place. You know what to do, don't you?" His face stiffened. The hand holding the knife tightened. Then Bill let out a shout and ran forward. Isaac stood there with a somewhat troubled expression. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Everyone has to do things they don't want to do. At least once in their life, it happens to everyone." Annette's words echoed in his ears. "You probably won't be able to undo or erase it. It will haunt you and leave marks until the end of your life." "Young master," she had said while wiping his bloody hands, "then you will only have two choices left. One is to endure the shame of that sin, the other is to try and live for that person as well." Isaac's expression carried a deep sense of restraint. He recalled past events. Back then, Annette, burdened by the guilt of losing her friend Clara, had given him that advice. Ahead, the jailers had already spotted him. Bill threatened, "Give me that cup of water." The bastard thought to himself, but he didn't need to hear that advice twice. The wheels rolled and moved. On the cart were Annette and the other maids. Although their clothes were dirty, her eyes still shone brightly. Annette walked toward the castle because in this lifetime, Annette would not lose her friend. Looking back to some time ago before the group of maids was kidnapped, Hilda had asked radiantly, "Have you heard? The nobles from the south are looking for women from outside the city." Hearing this, Clara couldn't help but be curious. "Why is that?" she guessed. "Are the women in the city too ugly, so they're looking for beautiful women outside to marry?" She also started to have some thoughts of her own. "Should I go south then?" Hilda covered her mouth mysteriously. "I've looked into it a bit." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "There's someone who can take us to the south, just need to give them some money." Annette was sitting quietly when she was suddenly asked, leaving her dazed. "Hilda, Annette, do you want to come along?" But she refused. "I think I'll pass, I still need to take care of my father." Now Annette stood in the study reporting back. "That was the last time I saw Hilda and Clara, we never saw them again after that." Isaac thought to himself just as Bill suspected. He continued to ask, "Were you kidnapped while searching for those two?" Annette nodded in confirmation, her expression somewhat heavy. "When I met them again in the sewer, they had truly lost their minds." Her voice was desperate. "If I had stayed there for a few more days, I probably would have gone crazy too." Isaac empathized with that. It was easy to understand. He remembered that horrifying scene as it was a place where people were either bought and sold or eaten. "I was a person who had already reached the age of 70, let alone these young girls." Suddenly Annette confessed, "Actually I could have escaped." Recalling it made her feel uncomfortable. "The iron gate they used to lock me in was broken." When that happened, Annette was standing in front of the bars, stunned. Next to her, a whimpering sound suddenly broke out. She turned and saw Clara with disheveled hair. Deep down, Annette couldn't help but be shaken. "If I had stayed for a few more days." Her hand gripping the bars trembled, leaving Clara behind. Hearing this, Isaac's eyes became pained. Annette continued, "If that was the case, perhaps I would have been the one to send my friend to her death with my own hands. That is what happened." He expressed his understanding and gratitude. "It must have been difficult for you to recall those memories. Thank you for telling me." She hesitated and Annette looked a bit embarrassed. "There's one thing I'm still wondering about," he asked curiously. "What is it?" She recounted, "When the bandits brought us back to the mansion, Clara and I were very happy." Annette remembered that time, but she shivered with fear and bit her nails. "No, if I go back to the mansion, I will." Hearing this, Isaac was also confused. "If she goes back, will she die?" she helplessly replied. Yes, it seems she wasn't just afraid of being punished. He rubbed his chin in serious contemplation. I think I understand now, I will look into it. Annette smiled and watched him for a moment. Suddenly, she covered her mouth and giggled. Rosa said this. She said maybe the reason the bandits suddenly released us was because of you, young master. Annette teasing like that is really silly, isn't it? Isaac crossed his arms helplessly and thought to himself, she's quite perceptive, isn't she? She continued, but it actually makes sense. Because you are the only one who pays attention to servants like us, young master. He was somewhat stunned, surprised by those words. Isaac's blue eyes widened. Then he called out softly, Annette. Isaac said sincerely, thank you, I'm glad you think that way. He was about to say more but then stopped. Oh, never mind, let's talk later. Although she didn't quite understand, Annette didn't ask further. Ah yes, I'll go now. The door slowly closed. Isaac stretched his arms forward comfortably. His face couldn't hide his relief. Isaac thought of Annette. I've found an unexpected talent. Perhaps teaching her magic is worth a try. That day sunlight shone through the castle, and murmurs of conversation arose. Have you heard about the maids who just returned? The maids huddled and whispered. They were supposed to be fired, but now young Master Isaac has taken them back. I heard he and the head butler had a huge argument about it. Why would he go that far just for servants? Don't tell me he has feelings for them. The young master is at the age to start noticing women after all. Bill carried a tray into the storage room. He carefully placed his head down. Just then a shadow approached. Jordan called softly, Boss Bill. He wiped the dust off his hands. He frowned in dissatisfaction. Damn it, I told you not to call me that. Bill Nears, the new boss of the crime syndicate. Earlier, while escaping, Isaac had said to him, this sewer is always full of vagrants. Even if I clear out one organization in this environment, another one will rise up sooner or later. He instructed, instead of doing that, wouldn't it be better to keep them under control and manage them? Bill thought to himself. You planned this from the start. That's why you made me sign the contract, right? He clutched his head and gritted his teeth. Now, if there is any argument or rebellion, wouldn't my neck be the first to be snapped? After that, he calmed down and sat down in a spot there. Bill started asking for the situation. Did news only plant you guys in the mansion? He replied. Yes, the previous boss told us to keep an eye on the mansion. Hearing that, he sneered. That news guy is always planting people in noble houses. Looks like he isn't just a miserable madman. Jordan added, and the boss was always preparing an offering. Bill frowned after hearing that. Offering? What offering? He explained, offerings are presented to the knights around this time of year. The reason we've been stuck in this hellhole is because the knights have been protecting us. His complexion was shocked. Knights are backing you guys. A few days later in Isaac's bedroom, he manifested a fireball in his hand. Then Isaac swung it forward. His turquoise pupils shone brightly. The fire was just a distraction. The real deal was the ice pillar that followed right after it. The sphere aimed at the wall ahead. Suddenly his hand clenched. The fireball instantly vanished, leaving only the ice spike that crashed into the wall. Finishing up, Isaac panted for breath. After killing News, his mana circuits increased from 4 to 5. He understood that he needed to practice casting multiple spells simultaneously and continuously, because with News, he had just been lucky. Recalling beforehand his familiarity with the terrain, the guards being weaker than him, and his carelessness. All these conditions allowed News to drop his guard and take his life. His eyes narrowed slightly, filled with self-reproach. His hand, clenched by his side, trembled. No, I was the one who ended him with my own hands. Isaac collapsed onto the bed. Before he died, Jonas had told me many things, including the truth about the enemies of the Von Goth house. They were all optimized to deal with mages. He closed his eyes, telling himself, I won't have the same luck I had with News. I need to become stronger to protect Von Goth. The next morning, a loud call woke him from his slumber. Isaac sat up immediately. What is it? Lyra and Han walked in. It's morning, sir, please wake up. She signaled to Han, hand the young master's clothes. He turned away to get them. Yes. He put his feet on the floor and asked, why the sudden rush? What is this all about? Lyra brought over a basin of water. What do you mean, sir? She smiled and announced, the master has returned. Hearing this, he couldn't help but be startled. Isaac's heart pounded a few beats harder. Outside the castle gates, Isaac von Goth approached on horseback. Thinking of that, he asked distractedly, "Father is back." Back to a moment in his previous life, some carvings on the wooden wall were used to mark the passing days. In a dark room, a young man with long, light-colored hair sat at his desk. He used a quill to fill pages of a journal with extremely mysterious notes. The door to the room suddenly opened as the Lord walked in, holding a great sword. The Lord of the house turned his eyes in surprise toward the desk when he realized the unexpected presence of his son. The knight observed the person in the room with a look of surprise and suspicion, and his son Isaac stood silently facing him in the middle of the room, creating an incredibly tense atmosphere. Isaac stared at his father's boots while a few wood shavings and leaves fell onto the floor. As the Count helped his son in the dark room, carefully cutting his silver hair, the father said that if this was truly what he desired, he would respect that choice without a moment's hesitation. He added in a sorrowful voice that he could ensure everything would end peacefully and without any pain. An older Isaac with wrinkles on his face observed the situation with weariness and sorrow. The Count continued to carefully cut his son's long hair, while the boy remained in absolute silence. The father asked one last time if this was what he truly wanted, and the young man firmly confirmed it. The Count emotionally hugged his son and said that this would be the last time they saw each other. He touched his forehead to the young man in an affectionate gesture and shared a profound farewell before leaving. The father said he would go ahead to wait for him and left the room, leaving the young man alone in the darkness. He asked his son to come to him without carrying any regrets in his heart. Back to the present, the sunlight of a beautiful day shone through the large and beautiful windows of the study in the mansion. Isaac thought that this was the first time they had met face to face since that tragic day. The young man sat down and greeted his father, who was focused on reading important family reports. The Count said he heard that he had recently helped the sick children in Black Goose Village. Isaac was surprised by the question, and his father revealed that he had heard the story from Schiller but found it hard to believe. The boy answered quite modestly, saying he was just lucky to be able to treat the children. He lied, saying he had found the correct answer for that unusual pneumonia in an ancient book. The father tapped his fingers on the wooden desk while thinking about his son's story. The Count changed the subject and asked how his physical condition had been lately after training. Isaac replied with relief that he no longer caused any people explosions and that the doctor they invited was truly very skilled. Sunlight shone through the beautiful, vibrant stained glass of the library, illuminating the large office. The father and son continued their conversation very calmly and peacefully in the vast study. The father looked at his son seriously and asked how the command and daily life at the castle were going. Isaac proactively asked specifically about news regarding the important border fortress. The Lord asked back about his son's interest, and the boy replied that one day he would need to go there to serve. The Count explained that the situation there remained unchanged with many monsters, knights, and heavy snowfall. He added that the only big news was that they had stopped in Burn City on the way back. The young man recalled that Burn City was where the dangerous sewer system was located. The father pointed at his pipe and revealed that a terrible, extremely serious incident had occurred there. He reported that a private soldier had attacked his commander, and Isaac deduced that the traitor must have been eliminated. The Lord denied this and explained that the injured commander himself had unexpectedly requested a military court. Isaac became thoughtful, wondering why the commander would take such a suspicious action. Suddenly, the door opened, and the Count greeted those who had just arrived. Two knights walked into the room, respectfully greeting the young master and praising his growth. Isaac glanced at the two men with an analytical and silent gaze, trying to read their thoughts. One of the two knights, the one wearing a headband, smiled at him kindly without suspecting his doubts. The Lord allowed Fickle and Randolph to enter and politely excused Isaac to go rest. The boy immediately accepted his father's order and left the room, closing the large, exquisite wooden door behind him. Once outside, he heard the voice of one of the two men demanding that a military court be convened as soon as possible. The man insisted that the traitor needed to be removed quickly to maintain military discipline among the troops. The Count thought he was acting too hastily and asked Randolph if he agreed with the execution. Randolph calmly replied that he only followed all direct orders from the commander-in-chief. The other man sighed and sneered, asking if he would really say that even after the captain tore his ear off. Outside, Isaac walked along the hallway in deep thought, trying to expose the secrets of the two men with his bright blue eyes. He analyzed the events, knowing that the border secret was involved. The boy remembered that the insignias on the two men's uniforms indicated that they were border guards. He cleverly deduced that the injured man named Randolph was the main victim of that mutiny. Suddenly, hurried, panting footsteps on the red carpet caught the young master's attention. A servant ran up in desperation, urgently requesting him to go with him and leave that place. He revealed in utter horror that an extremely urgent situation had just occurred inside the castle. The young master went with the servant through the outer and remote areas of the large stone castle. The protagonist asked the man what could be so urgent, and he said he had heard rumors about human trafficking in the sewer system, to which the boy replied that he already knew. Bill revealed that some people had taken bribes to turn a blind eye to the entire criminal situation. With an incredibly serious expression, the young master immediately asked who the culprit was. The servant began to sweat from the tension, hesitating to reveal the identities of those involved in the conspiracy. He revealed that the guilty ones were the Winterband Knights, which greatly surprised the boy. The man added that recently, the body of one of their allies had been found at the entrance to the sewers. He said that all parts of the victim's body had been cut off, except for the little finger of the left hand. The young master asked what had happened next, and the servant appeared very hesitant to continue. The man confessed that a horrific event had occurred early that morning. He revealed in terror that when he woke up, he had mysteriously found that very severed finger lying on his bed. The man said the enemy had sent a warning message directly through one of their subordinates. The threat stated clearly that if the money wasn't prepared within 2 days at most, the situation would become much worse. The servant panicked, realizing his own finger would be the next one to be cut off if he failed. He begged for help and blamed the boy for pushing him into that dangerous leadership position. The young master maintained a calm expression while coldly analyzing the severity of the entire situation. He asked if anyone had witnessed the attack, and the servant replied that there was a witness. The witness recounted that a flash of a blade had appeared before their eyes, and everything was over in the blink of an eye. The only notable detail they could remember was that the attacker had wrapped a bandage around his head. The boy narrowed his bright blue eyes as he recognized that rather distinct physical description. He simply said he understood the situation, which infuriated the servant due to his coldness. The young master began to walk slowly, and calmly told the servant not to worry. He assured him with absolute confidence that the man would not die, and that he would protect his life. He remembered that his father had returned with 2 knights requesting to convene a military court. On the way, they had stopped near the sewers and eliminated a criminal to set an example for the others. The entire physical description provided by the witness perfectly matched the appearance of that border knight. The young master gritted his teeth in anger as he realized the insolence and betrayal of his own guard. He walked with determined, indignant steps, thinking about the hypocrisy of those so-called border knights. He concluded that if everything was true, they were no different from a terminal illness that needed to be excised from the kingdom. The young master approached the dungeon, immediately attracting the attention of the guard on duty with his footsteps. The guard was quite surprised and asked what had brought the young heir all the way down to the bottom of the dungeon. The boy asked directly but the presence of the prisoner, who had been sentenced to death for mutiny. In one of the darkest cells, the criminal was waiting, shackled by his terrible final fate. The young master resolutely declared that he had come there only to speak to the prisoner. The shackled man opened his eyes, revealing a gaze that was incredibly sharp and terrifying in the darkness. The boy revealed that his purpose there was to confirm whether the knights were truly involved with the bandits. In front of the bars, he asked directly if the man knew about Nyazi's notorious criminal organization. The boy added that he had heard about their involvement in the horrific human trafficking. Upon hearing that revelation, the prisoner reacted immediately, clenching his fists with great strength. He glared at the young master with a look that was incredibly dark and hostile, maintaining absolute silence in the cell. The young master observed the details of the prisoner's appearance and felt that his face looked quite familiar. He asked if the man knew about the mysterious connection between the city sewers and his military commander. The shackled man only kept his lips tight, refusing to answer the boy's questions. He rattled his heavy iron chains and coldly warned that he would only say this once. Suddenly, he lunged forward aggressively and clutched the bars, startling the young master standing before him. The prisoner roared in anger that he knew nothing, and demanded that the boy get out of there immediately. The boy continued to face his fury with absolute calmness, showing no fear or backing down. Ignoring the screams, the young master calmly asked what the real name of the rebellious prisoner was. He answered his name was Carlson, and the boy smiled when he heard that important revelation. The young master finally remembered his face and asked if he would continue to lie, calling him Kulla. The prisoner's eyes widened in total shock when he realized his real name had been discovered. He stepped back in surprise, causing his heavy iron chains to clatter in the dark cell. The rebel glared at the boy in profound shock and asked where he could have possibly learned that secret name. The young man recalled that he had known this name when the kingdom's bloody civil war reached its peak. That entire horrific power struggle began during the formal royal succession ceremony for the throne. On that occasion, the second prince was defeated and decided to betray the fatherland, allying with the empire to seize power. This horrific betrayal ultimately caused a violent and bloody collision right in the middle of the celebration. When the kingdom collapsed, the people revolted and began a rebellion led by Kyle himself during the Civil War. Now he was pretending to be someone else and desperately asked how a child could know so many royal secrets. The boy answered with absolute calmness that he had simply read the entire incredible story in a history book. The book contained detailed records and beautiful illustrations of the lives of many famous criminals on the continent. The work described the young leader as a military genius destined to become the seventh master swordsman of the world. Facing him directly, the young master realized that the description of his talent was absolutely true. The prisoner radiated an impressive amount of mana thanks to his incredibly rigorous training. He swallowed hard, trying to imagine the destructive power this warrior would have once he truly awakened. In his previous life, the rebel had escaped his sentence and angrily demanded that the youth tell him how he knew all those things. The boy told him to stay calm and revealed that he also knew the man was the legitimate son of a legendary warrior. The warrior began to tremble all over with tension and whispered, asking who this boy really was. Isaac asked how he could serve in the military without recognizing the eldest son of the family ruling there. The prisoner asked if he had come to finish him off, but the boy said he wasn't interested in the life of a mediocre mercenary. He added that he had no interest in a deserter who had disappeared from the map for over 10 consecutive years. The man doubted the identity of the speaker, but Isaac said he only wanted an answer to one single, serious question. With an incredibly serious expression, the young master prepared to extract the important information he craved. He asked why the border commander was directly involved in the human trafficking. Pristity looked at the burning candle and said that if he was the young master, he should know what was happening there. He stepped forward, his chains rattling, and said, "That is the biggest reason why I'm not saying anything." The young master crossed his arms in thought, understanding the man's strong reluctance to cooperate with the investigation. The boy warned that the commander would shift all the blame onto him and turn him into a wanted fugitive. He coldly concluded that if he acted that way, the prisoner would never be able to carry out his plan for revenge. The word revenge made the prisoner's shackled hands tremble instantly with hatred. He remained completely silent, and the two continued to stare at each other in the heavy, tense silence within the castle's dark dungeon. The boy decided to turn away, realizing that this man would not be as easily manipulated as the servant Bill. He left the dungeon corridor, knowing that this time he would need to act in an entirely different way. The young master concluded that his only viable option now was to lure the traitorous knights out himself. A few drops of water began to fall, echoing quietly against the damp walls of the sewer. Two figures in dark cloaks moved stealthily through the long, abandoned tunnel. One of the intruders felt it was very strange not to see any traces of the Nuz gang's minions around. The hooded man pointed his index finger forward, indicating something unusual at the end of the hall. He was surprised to find that all the iron cells that had held the kidnapped slaves were completely empty. They complained about delays in bribes and being suddenly summoned to this meeting by the former bandit leader. The intruder opened a large, crude door, wondering if the new bandit leader intended to break their agreement. Stepping through the entrance, the two criminals stopped instantly and let out gasps of surprise. The servant Bill wore an extremely awkward, trembling smile while trying to hide his total panic. Trembling with extreme fear, the man gestured with his hand and politely invited the two guests inside. One of the disguised knights grew suspicious immediately upon seeing a henchman of Nir's dressed as a servant in the mansion. He noticed the man was unarmed, but also observed that the servant's legs wouldn't stop shaking from the tension. The two criminals exchanged a quick, silent, and complicit look, deciding to proceed deeper into the dark room. They drew the sharp swords hidden under their cloaks and stepped fully into the secret lair. The hooded knight entered the dark room with a cold gaze, trying to identify who was lurking in the shadows. In front of them, a mysterious figure remained sitting with arms crossed at the head of a large wooden table. He mockingly asked if the person there was the new boss of Nears, who had summoned them without proper hospitality. The man threatened, saying the fake leader must think he had 9 lives to dare treat them that way. The mysterious figure asked a single question, leaving the two intruders completely paralyzed with shock. They immediately became highly alert upon realizing the calm voice belonged to a small child. His face illuminated by candlelight, the boy calmly asked why they were acting so violently. One of the knights began to sweat coldly under his hood as he clearly recognized the person sitting in front of him. Suddenly, one of them knelt onto the floor, confusing his companion standing beside him. The soldier asked about that action, but the warrior kneeling desperately shouted, ordering him to kneel. He asked if his ally was an idiot for not recognizing the great and important status of the young boy present. The knight bowed his head in deep submission, declaring it a great honor to meet him again in this place. The young master stood up calmly with a smirk and asked if they would like something to drink. By calling them by their true names, the young master left Sir Fickle and Sir Randolph trembling in terror in the darkness. Everything had begun a little earlier in an isolated cabin in the middle of the freezing forest. Inside, a man enthusiastically held a bag full of gold coins they had acquired. He praised the skills of the late Nears in making so much money so easily. Holding a gold coin in his hand, the other was happy that this money would ensure food and firewood for the whole month. Hearing that, his companion said they could even trade his old sword and still have some left over. He began tossing the gold coins to his partner while laughing loudly at their luck that night. But their joy didn't last long as heavy footsteps and a mysterious boot appeared at the entrance. A voice from the shadows ordered them to stop immediately, startling the two criminals. Kyle appeared before them, revealing that he had just overheard the entire conversation about the money. The man tried to hide the bag of money on the table with a desperate and futile panicky gesture. With a threatening look, Kyle asked exactly what they thought they were doing. Back in the present, Isaac calmly drank his tea while listening to the explanation from the two guards. Sitting at the head of the table, the young heir accepted that they truly had a reason for it. He said that his father was a very strict man who acted only as the shield of the North. They admired his honor but couldn't sit still and watch their soldiers suffer from hunger and thirst. With no other choice, they decided to extort the bandits to compensate for the lack of resources and to protect the land. Fickle agreed enthusiastically, saying that had been their plan from the beginning. The young master listened to everything with his eyes closed, preparing to deliver his final judgment. He opened his striking blue eyes and coldly sentenced Sir Fickle and Sir Randolph to the total despair of the two knights. Isaac declared the punishment for their crimes to be definitive death. The boy warned that they would be handed over to the military tribunal, because his father would also pass the exact same judgment. Fickle lost his patience, slamming the table and asking if the boy still didn't understand their pain. The soldier looked back angrily and concluded that a brat like him would never understand their suffering. He asked if Isaac had ever felt extreme hunger or witnessed comrades fall in the cold without proper weapons. The young master looked at him without emotion and replied very directly that he had never experienced that. Isaac stood up and said Fickle was just piling up empty excuses for his mistakes. The young master questioned the kidnapping of civilians, and Fickle quickly blamed Nears for acting alone. The boy still looked at the two merchants with a very strict and overwhelming gaze. Isaac asked if he truly believed he hadn't crossed the unforgivable line just like the bandits. Fickle became completely enraged when he realized the young master would show them absolutely no mercy. He clenched his fists in anger, realizing he was a fool for expecting sympathy from this boy. The traitor ordered Randolph to stand up so they could fight as the true swords of Goth. With a fierce look, Fickle drew his metal sword, ready to eliminate the young master right on the spot. He pointed the sharp sword tip at Isaac, vowing to slash anyone who got in his way. Randolph panicked at his partner's insane attitude and begged him to reconsider. Fickle replied that the commander still had another young master and they had to eliminate this threat immediately while tension filled the room. The boy continued to observe their reactions coldly. At that moment, Randolph drew his sword, and a powerful blue spiritual energy began to wrap around the blade. The knight stepped forward with heavy steps as he channeled his spiritual aura through his boots. The young master tracked the soldier's movement and seemed slightly curious about the situation. Fickle smiled, believing his partner had finally decided to help him destroy the boy. He focused all his attention on attacking Isaac, never imagining what his companion was about to do. Randolph looked at his friend with deep sadness, wondering how things had come to this. He nostalgically remembered that, in the beginning, all their actions were truly for the benefit of Goth. But he realized the path they were on had become too dark, hesitating to use his blade. The soldier bowed his head, wondering if they could still call that loyalty. Randolph bit his lip hard as he made an extremely difficult decision about their fate. He stood up to confront his friend and asked if he still remembered the oath they had made earlier. The man recalled the covenant that if one were the sword, the other would be the shield. Randolph remembered Carlson's advice that a perfect sword that cuts through everything without breaking is a masterpiece. But he understood that the situation changed completely when the warrior deviated from the original path. He warned that if this masterpiece developed a will of its own, it would eventually become a terrifying, vicious sword. Fickle was completely shocked to be blocked by his ally and asked what he thought he was doing. The two brothers-in-arms began exchanging intense blows while their blades clashed powerfully. Randolph confessed that he could only understand the painful truth after losing his ear. He shouted at Fickle that the prisoner Carlson was absolutely right about the corruption consuming them. Fickle broke into a cold sweat when he realized the partner who had been through so many battles had actually turned against him. He tried to convince Randolph to stop this madness, warning that the young heir would take his life. Randolph firmly replied that if that happened, it would only be a tragedy they brought upon themselves. He decided to speak clearly once and for all and threw the harshest truths into his old partner's face. During the exchange of intense attacks, he slapped Fickle with the fact that that money was never just for the soldiers. He asked if the traitor really spent all that vast fortune just thinking of the territory's prosperity. The fight ended brutally, and silence returned to the room after the fatal clash concluded. Back in the dungeon, Randolph explained to Isaac that this was the reason Carlson decided to act in the past. The knight revealed that they only intended to silence the prisoner, but ended up being defeated by him. Isaac listened to everything calmly and concluded with disdain that they simply lost to that warrior. The soldier admitted that Carlson could have finished them off right then if he wanted to. Instead, he only cut off Randolph's ear as a lesson and let himself be captured without resistance. Crossing his arms, Isaac asked if he avoided Carlson's punishment just because he felt guilty. Randolph bowed his head sadly and remained completely silent. Faced with this truth, he trembled with anxiety and confessed in a small voice that he was extremely worried about the future awaiting him. The man wondered what would become of his beloved family if this entire betrayal story were exposed. Isaac looked at him seriously and said that the knight must understand the consequences better than anyone. Randolph shivered in panic at the boy's coldness and felt the terrible weight of his past choices. In the corner of the room, the servant Bill was carrying the bag containing Fickle's body and desperately thinking of ways to escape. Isaac kept his gaze fixed on the prisoner and began to strategically plan to resolve the situation. He called Sir Randolph in an authoritative tone that made the knight pay attention immediately. The young heir asked directly if he was willing to atone for his serious crimes in another way. With the knight's acceptance, the official story of the incident began to be rewritten by the young master. The new version stated that Randolph and Fickle only dealt with Nears to get emergency supplies for the army. The report pointed out that Fickle had acted alone out of greed, leading the smuggling ring and kidnapping the maids in the mansion. It also specified that when the plan failed, the traitor tried to sell Isaac to foreigners and use the boy as a hostage. But the evil plot was stopped in time thanks to the heroic actions of a special person. The official report declared that the loyal knight Randolph was the one who saved the heir and stopped the criminal. Thanks to that, all the terrible sins were dumped entirely onto the shoulders of the dead Fickle. The traitor's corpse was put on public display in the town square in front of the locals as a warning to everyone. Wearing a dark cloak that covered his face, Randolph witnessed the punishment for his old partner. The knight walked quietly through the village streets under the watchful eyes of the surrounding people. Afterward, Isaac met his father in the luxurious and majestic living room of the Guth family mansion. While drinking hot tea, the boy thought that the severe lack of resources was the real cause of the betrayal. The terrible lack of basic necessities was the harsh and cruel reality that the Guth family faced every day. They protected the northern border and received annual taxes from the royal family. This was their main income. However, the big problem was that this royal tax had decreased sharply every year. Even so, the Goth family could neither complain to the king nor try to get rich independently. All this misery occurred due to the actions of Zeke von Goth, the mad mage who burned down the imperial capital in the past. The cursed legacy of their ancestor had destroyed the family's reputation and glory forever. Because no one could defeat the mad mage, the king submitted to the emperor and Zeke was eventually destroyed by a knight. Afterward, the kingdom became a vassal and the Goth family lost their ducal title, remaining only as counts. Banished to the barren north, any attempt to accumulate wealth would be viewed with extreme suspicion. The royal family would consider it treason, making maintaining the current system the safest way to survive. However, Isaac calmly thought that this hasty conclusion might be a huge mistake on their part. The boy warned his father and advisors that this old-fashioned thinking was just an unfounded assumption. The Count's eyes widened in surprise when he realized the audacity and great intelligence behind his son's words. Isaac explained that the kingdom's finances were weakening every year and the shield tax would continue to decrease accordingly. He asked if the king was truly suspicious or just simply relieved to see the Goth family self-sufficient. The young master decided to be blunt and exposed the truest facts about the territory's real financial problem. Isaac asserted that the real barrier had never been the royal ban, but the fact that they had never found a solution. Isaac reminded them that they were completely surrounded by barren lands and dangerous enemy forces. The Count contemplated deeply about the opinions his son put forth while resting his chin on his hands. He admitted that the boy's idea had merit, but demanded that he provide something concrete to solve the crisis. The head of the family clasped his hands together and warned that such a proposal only had value when accompanied by a viable action plan. With a sharp gaze, the man asked directly if the boy was capable of providing this saving answer. Isaac held a steady stance, his bright blue eyes showing he knew exactly what to do. The young heir reached out and stated with absolute conviction that they must begin acting without further delay. The boy revealed that the crucial first step was to decisively sever all ties with the old church. He explained that the ascetic doctrines of the church were preventing the family from prospering and creating true wealth. The Count was tense at the bold proposal and warned that the Vatican would not sit idly by and accept this rebellion. The boy clenched his fist with determination and agreed that precisely because of that, they needed a perfect excuse. Isaac wore a cunning smile and assured him that he already had the ideal method to create an undeniable pretext. Faced with that impressive revelation, the Count turned to Schiller seeking wise counsel. The head servant took a sip of tea and wondered if all those brilliant ideas truly originated from Isaac's mind. Schiller praised the boy with admiration, suggesting it was hard to believe he had so much wisdom while struggling with his mana. Impressed by the turn of events, the Count rose from his armchair to oversee his son's next steps. Through the mansion window, he observed Isaac calmly walking in the garden with his new allies. The boy walked with Kyle while discussing preparations aimed at permanently weakening the church's influence. The Count watched the scene from afar with a pensive gaze, proud of his heir's premature maturity. He placed his hand against the cold windowpane while thinking about the bright destiny awaiting the family. Schiller maintained his usual elegant composure while tracking his master's silent thoughts. The conversation between father and son ended, leaving in the air a certain belief that major changes were about to happen. A few days later, south of Bern City, a mysterious carriage traveled along the road toward a church. The vehicle stopped abruptly in front of the ancient temple, while a hooded figure waited patiently. A man in a dark cloak holding a bright lantern stepped out to welcome the guests from the carriage. With a gloomy tone, the hooded figure spoke a secret password to initiate the forbidden negotiation. The carriage driver slowly stepped down, remaining highly vigilant upon hearing the cult ally's password. The guest replied with the second part of the eerie password, confirming his identity in the secret meeting. The lantern bearer nodded in agreement upon realizing he was working with the right partner. He ordered the promised cargo to be brought immediately so they could begin the horrific dark ritual. Two hooded figures dragged a silver-haired boy who was tightly bound out from the carriage. The boy was shoved brutally by the henchmen, unable to resist due to the rope binding his hands. The leader asked if this fragile boy was truly the noble tribute they had promised for the ritual. He brought the lantern close to the hostage's face to verify the victim's identity himself. The man wore a twisted, terrifying smile while relishing the victory of the ruthless kidnapping. The light-haired boy remained gagged and silent, showing no signs of panic in front of the cultists. The kidnapper ordered the servant to bring the true precious reward that the agreement had promised. He arrogantly assured them that the terrifying goddess of fire would welcome this noble tribute with open arms. The group began to lead the young victim deep into the dark interior of the temple where they would perform the ritual. An elderly woman in a dark cloak welcomed the group and said that everything was proceeding according to the goddess's will. Afterward, she turned back and asked in a mysterious tone for everyone to follow her into the ancient temple. Bill, disguised as a carriage driver, whispered disgustedly about the dark cult they were about to enter. He quickly corrected himself and ordered in a low voice for the group to keep moving forward without hesitation. Kyle and Randolph followed right behind the kidnappers, escorting young Isaac, who was pretending to be tied up with rope. The elderly woman raised her bright lantern to illuminate the dark path and once again requested them to follow. The group descended the dark and damp stone stairs leading straight to the underground lair of the fanatics. To maintain their cover in front of the cultists, Randolph placed his hand firmly and authoritatively on Isaac's shoulder. Cullen walked while keeping a cold, focused gaze under the hood of his cloak, perfectly ready for any danger. He observed everything around him with extreme attention, knowing that even a small mistake could put everyone's life at risk. A flashback to a few days earlier, when a cup of hot tea was served during a private conversation. Kyle asked if he was released due to exposing the knight's crimes, and Isaac confirmed that was the plan. The young master explained that rebellion was a serious crime, so the warrior had lost his leadership position. Kyle calmly replied that he didn't even know he once held such an important position in the army. He paused for a moment before bringing the teacup to his lips. Drawn by the boy's next words, Isaac asked with a friendly smile if he recognized this type of tea, revealing that the drink originated from his own homeland. The warrior looked at the tea in surprise upon realizing the young heir knew his true foreign origin. Cullen placed the teacup back on the table and asked directly why he didn't report him to the authorities. He reminded the heir that the boy knew very well his real name wasn't Carlson. Isaac confessed that he needed to keep this secret to be able to use his skills at the right moment. Kyle began to break into a cold sweat at that revelation, unable to comprehend what the boy was planning. The young master advised the man to focus on his own goal instead of trying to guess what others were thinking. He asked if Kyle was aiming for the life of the greedy old man who destroyed the family he tried to build. Isaac revealed the target's name was Viscount Klaus von Bottmer, which left the warrior completely shocked. Kyle was horrified, asking how the boy knew this and why he wouldn't try to stop his revenge. The warrior explained that his target was an important nobleman in this kingdom, while he himself was just a foreigner. Isaac revealed that what he truly needed was a perfect sword possessing its own iron will. He promised that if the man lent him his legendary strength, he would ensure the desired revenge was carried out. Kyle watched the heir in silence, realizing this was a partnership offer he couldn't refuse. Back in Burn City, a preacher screamed in the middle of the street to attract the attention of all the locals. The fanatic roared at the top of his lungs about the horrific threats plaguing the region. He warned that dark magic was spreading like a plague and the cultists were committing inexcusable acts of cruelty. The preacher ordered everyone to seek salvation in faith and not in a feudal lord who only stood by watching without acting. Inside the carriage passing through the area, Kyle observed the man and commented on the old church's fanatics. Randolph complained that the church taxed the family heavily but continued to smear the Lord of Gothia in public. Isaac interrupted the two allies' discussion, saying this topic wasn't the most important one right now. Randolph worriedly asked if the young master was absolutely certain about acting as bait for the ritual. The heir explained that fanatics sought fame and there was no bait more attractive than him in the north. Kyle warned that they had no idea what deadly dangers awaited them inside the fanatics' lair. Randolph emphasized the terrifying rumors about cruel rituals and asked if it was really worth risking their lives. Isaac ignored the warnings and asked if the old church was truly providing financial support for this dark cult. The boy's blue eyes flashed with determination, as he analyzed the details of the conspiracy in his mind. Kyle commented that the money they used to bribe the guards came directly from the cursed cult's treasury. The young master agreed and confirmed this was the official version they would present to the kingdom. Isaac recalled that the near coins were of high quality and minted by the royal family, which couldn't be the case with a bandit. Randolph agreed that the origin of those gold coins was highly suspicious. It indicated the presence of a powerful ally. Kyle speculated that only the old church could have this kind of access, but questioned whether this could prove a direct link to the cult. He wondered if the young master really intended to cling to such a flimsy and meaningless hope. The protagonist recalled that it was around this time that the situation began to descend into chaos across the entire Northern Territory. The dark cult began to destroy the land from within with bizarre rituals that left the people paralyzed with fear. The old church was the biggest beneficiary of this widespread panic, pretending to hunt down members of the secret cult. They arrested believers and purged them with public bonfires in the middle of the village square. Witnessing this fake divine mercy, the people began to worship the church even more. Since then, Goth's situation became unsustainable, and the nobles began to complain about the terrible absurdity. They grumbled that the church had doubled the tithes and even demanded soldiers for construction while they were struggling to survive. The territory began to suffer under financial pressure and heavier demands from the old church. Therefore, the lord of the territory had to endure extreme famine, and Isaac decided it was time to decisively break the pact with them. This brave attitude was only the first step toward being able to protect the people and the Goth territory. Back in the dark dungeon, the elderly woman walked slowly down the stone stairs while leaning on an old cane. The elderly woman said that everything began here when the church burned this place down, and only 3 saints survived the Great Fire. She said the wounded survivors had seen God face to face, but Bill only wished she would shut up once and for all. The woman continued her bizarre sermon, claiming that the human soul resides directly inside human flesh. She explained that eating this flesh would cause the soul to be reborn within them with all the wisdom and vitality of the sacrificed person. At that moment, they saw many believers eating the forbidden parts of the body at a gruesome feast to achieve eternity. Bill was absolutely horrified as he witnessed the disgusting and barbaric acts taking place right before his eyes. The elderly woman struck her cane hard against the ground and shouted that the prophesied tribute had finally arrived at the altar. The fanatics became excited on the floor when she ordered them to eat the flesh to become as noble and pure as the victim. With a terrifying smile, the old woman introduced Isaac as the perfect soul possessing all the qualities for the feast. She opened her mouth in a grotesque way and ordered everyone to start eating the boy on the spot without the slightest mercy. Bill lost his patience, kicked the elderly woman away, and said he couldn't listen to any more of this crazy and meaningless nonsense. He roared in frustration, asking Isaac how much more of this bizarre insanity they had to endure in this cave. The knight stepped forward and began to undo the ropes falsely binding the young master to initiate the battle. Isaac removed the gag and sighed with relief when he saw Bill finally acting just as he expected. The young master calmly ordered his allies to engage only those fanatics who attacked them first. The fanatics backed away in terror when they realized the supposed victims were actually uncompromising warriors. Isaac seriously warned his associates not to forget the true strategic plan that had brought them to this place. The old woman lying on the ground screamed with hatred, promising that a terrible curse from the goddess would befall the intruders. Randolph interrupted her with a precise strike to the face to silence her forever and end that annoying screaming. The knight pointed his sharp weapon out and warned the other fanatics that anyone who dared to take a step forward would be eliminated instantly. He assured them with a terrifying gaze that he would take down any opponent before they could even feel pain. Upon hearing that horrific threat, most of the cultists panicked and fled, trying to escape the place. Randolph was slightly surprised to see the entire gang fleeing desperately through the dark corridors of the dungeon. The henchmen ran so fast that in just a few seconds, the temple entrance was completely empty and silent. Kyle asked if they should chase after those fleeing, but Isaac replied that the priority now was to search the entire area. Randolph sighed wearily and concluded that these crazy fanatics were nothing more than a chaotic joke. Kyle knelt beside the old woman who had fainted on the floor and calmly asked if she could stand up on her own. The elderly woman regained consciousness in a state of confusion, asking where she was and begging them not to hit her, which made Kyle curious about her reaction. Randolph sarcastically asked if she had suddenly aged and made a satirical comment about the old woman's mental state. The elderly woman begged for mercy, mistaking Isaac for the deacon, but the boy only called her mother in a friendly way. The young master bent down patiently with a gentle smile and asked where this old woman's actual home was. A moment later, the group arrived at a humble wooden cabin located in the slums in the south of Burn City. As they entered the house and looked up at the attic, the knights were stunned into shock by what they had just discovered. Before them lay a chest overflowing with a large pile of high-quality, bright silver coins. They couldn't believe that a poor and humble old woman was hiding a massive fortune in the attic. Randolph pushed his greedy comrade aside and asked if they were sure this money belonged to the royal family. Isaac nodded firmly, confirming the loyal knight Randolph's suspicions were correct. The boy analyzed the coins very carefully and ensured that the official seal engraved on the metal belonged to the royal mint. He celebrated because they had obtained evidence linking the cult to the church, but was interrupted by a knock at the door and a calling voice. Suddenly, the cabin door opened, and someone announced loudly that they were entering the humble room. The newcomer's voice echoed throughout the house as he kindly asked how the old woman was doing. Up in the attic, Isaac's eyes widened in complete astonishment when he recognized whose voice that was. The boy immediately realized the person who had just entered was an influential clergyman from the old church. With a discreet smile on his face, the man asked in a friendly tone if the ritual had been a great success. Sitting on the bed, the old woman broke into a cold sweat and hesitated to answer the man before her. Trying to hide her utter panic, she trembled all over and tried to mutter a few disjointed words to distract the guest's attention. With panic-stricken eyes, she stammered in terror and claimed that demons had infiltrated the temple and destroyed everything. The woman loudly revealed that ruthless creatures had desecrated the sacred altar and annihilated all the cult's followers. In her panic, she begged for a divine miracle while the clergyman was confused and demanded a clear explanation about the demons. Barely able to breathe, she tried to feign madness by calling the man the deacon and making up an absurd story in the room. The old woman sobbed on the bed, saying her husband was hitting her and begging desperately for help. The clergyman sighed impatiently at the theatrics, deducing that the old woman had completely lost her mind. However, a slight wooden sound from the attic caught the man's attention and made him instantly alert. He turned sharply with a suspicious gaze toward the wooden stairs leading to the attic. The clergyman observed the top of the stairs in the darkness, suspecting someone was hiding up there. The man gathered magic energy in his hands and coldly warned that he had sensed an intruder's presence in the house. He concluded in his thoughts that the old woman was no longer useful and that their secrets must not be revealed. Therefore, he intended to burn the evidence of his corruption along with all the assets accumulated in that filthy attic. Kyle observed the threat from above and warned that true demons often hide behind a facade of holy light. In the blink of an eye, Kyle appeared behind the cleric with his sharp blade pressed against the traitor's throat. Trembling and sweating in terror, the cleric tried to threaten the warrior, warning that the Vatican would avenge his death. Isaac began slowly walking down the wooden stairs, commenting that he had finally remembered the man's identity. The young master smirked and greeted the traitor sarcastically as he approached in the living room. Time skipped to the next morning at the majestic cathedral in the city, where the deacon appeared tied up and captured. Tied tightly to a wooden chair with heavy ropes, the corrupt cleric had no way to escape. Weeping in desperation, the prisoner began to confess that the old church wanted to expand its influence in the territory. He revealed that to achieve this goal, the bishop had ordered them to create a fictional villain to terrify the people. Thus, the man had created a new doctrine and incited the poor vagrants to form that terrifying cult. The deacon bitterly admitted that this very conspiracy had birthed the horrific cult that once terrorized the land. Randolph commented indignantly that this was the worst confession he had ever heard and asked what they would do next. Isaac kept a cold and contemplative expression, knowing this confession was the exact card he needed for his game. The young boy decided that his advisor Schiller would take the prisoner to the cathedral so they could begin formal negotiations. The bound cleric spat on the ground and laughed loudly, saying the bishop would certainly punish the Guth family severely. Not letting him speak further, Isaac admitted that he himself was the one who had orchestrated this plan. So if they wanted to collect their debt, they should just tell them to come here and find him. This left the fat man completely stunned. Night fell over the territory. In the silent dungeon, a lonely candle burned, casting flickering shadows on the cold stone walls. The monk kept stomping his feet on the ground out of restlessness. The bound cleric broke into a cold sweat, thinking that his entire plan had collapsed in just one night because of a child. Suddenly, an unbearable sharp pain struck the deacon's chest, causing him to moan in pure agony. The man laughed grotesquely and mocked that the young heir was nothing but a descendant of savages. The prisoner assured him that divine justice would descend upon Isaac's sins before he drew his final breath. He felt his strength fading as he rambled that the bishop would certainly bring the punishment the boy deserved. With a crazed and hateful gaze, the man used his last bit of strength to curse the entire Goth bloodline. The cleric looked at the puncture wound on his chest in astonishment, unable to believe his time was almost up. He groaned in pain one last time as the mysterious hooded attacker turned and left. The mysterious figure who had eliminated the deacon walked out of the dungeon with cold, silent footsteps. However, heavy footsteps blocked his escape, and a firm voice asked if the intruder was already planning to leave. Isaac appeared majestically at the entrance of the dungeon, holding a bright lantern to block the attacker's path. The hooded figure stopped instantly upon realizing he had fallen into the boy's perfect trap. Isaac smiled coldly in the darkness, commenting that it was a pity they had to meet in such a tragic way. The young heir revealed the hooded man's true identity, calling the man Bishop Lavanaz. At the same time, the outside of the building was already surrounded by a group of soldiers. Not far away, Kyle and Randolph, hiding in a treetop, observed everything. They chatted with each other. If the young master guessed correctly, they are people from the old church, right? Exactly. Seeing that things went wrong, they came to silence them immediately. I never expected the young master to guess so accurately. Randolph looked toward the group of people, his gaze somewhat pensive as he muttered, "The old church, huh? They made a fortune off near, yet neither I nor Fickle knew anything about it." "Wait, no, that's not quite it. It's not that we didn't know. We knew perfectly well it was dirty money, but we turned a blind eye and didn't ask any questions." Kyle glanced at him slightly. Then he stood up and said, "Now that you know, don't end up with a pathetic outcome like Fickle. You still have a family to protect." These words seemed to awaken Randolph. His hands clenched tightly with resolve. Seeing that, Kyle also nodded in satisfaction. "Let's focus on the job. There are 13 of them in total. Clean them all out. Don't let anyone get in the young master's way." As they spoke, they drew the sharp swords at their waists. Returning inside the room, the cold voice of Livonius also rang out, "You don't seem surprised to see me, or has the Marquis's son been special since birth?" He spoke while wearing his familiar, compassionate smile. But at that very moment, Isaac's eyes widened. An attack struck straight at him. Luckily, Isaac dodged at the very last possible moment. It turned out the attack aimed at Isaac was a wooden stake. It was so powerful that it pierced right into the wall. Isaac immediately guessed. Did he use teleportation onto the pile of stakes, or was that magic power from the grimoire? Thinking that, he said, "I'm quite surprised too. I didn't think you would come here in person." "Why do your eyes look so joyful, as if you just found gold?" Responding to his words, Livonius also curled his lip. "Is that so? Actually, I am very saddened too. I didn't expect the deacon to fall into darkness so easily. But he's grateful to me anyway. After all, he brought the seed of disaster right to me." As soon as he finished speaking, the man drew another sharp stake from his side and threw it straight at the protagonist with wind-tearing speed. Isaac's eyes remained focused. He reached his hand forward, and in a single moment, Isaac swatted the sharp stake away, causing it to drive deep into the stone floor. Livonius's expression became panicked as things didn't go according to his plan. "How can you use ice magic too?" he shouted. While Isaac simply said calmly, "Who knows, maybe I just sold my soul to the devil." Livonius's gaze began to turn ugly, but then he became a little calmer. "Isaac, do you remember? When you were just born, I was the one who performed your cleansing ritual. I wasn't happy at all when you appeared in this world back then. Do you even study history?" Isaac shrugged and replied, "I do, just like everyone else." Livonius stepped forward and said, "Then you should know that your birth was a mistake. Most of the cultists here are from the frontier tribes, barbaric savages running around pillaging and causing trouble. Yet your father, Count Goth, wanted to make peace with them. Then he even married a barbarian woman and gave birth to you. That marriage went against the will of heaven, so it's only natural that you were born cursed. You shouldn't have existed in this world to begin with." Hearing this, Isaac's eyes showed a hint of anger. That sounds truly grating, especially coming from someone who wants my life. Opposite him, Livonius still maintained his mocking smile. Do you know? The cultists often use these stakes for human sacrifice rituals, truly a bunch of savages. Today you will die at their hands. That way, the link between Goth and the savages will end and this land will be cleansed. Saying that, several other sharp stakes began flying toward Isaac. Isaac also focused his magic into his palms. Two sharp pieces of ice appeared in his palms. With this, the protagonist easily blocked Livonius's attack. It made Livonius's expression confused, thinking, this isn't just regular ice. He's hitting every single flying stake with precision. How is that even possible? This was thanks to what Isaac had trained with Lucas in his previous life. After being swatted away by Lucas, the protagonist panted and said, Lucas, let's stop here for today, I'm completely out of breath. Lucas said with a teasing tone, you're tired already? Isaac retorted, what do you mean already? It's been nearly an hour. Lucas reached out to help Isaac up while saying, but your swordsmanship has improved. Before, you couldn't even block one of my strikes, yet today you've blocked 5 in a row. The protagonist shook his head slightly. That's all thanks to your great teaching. Why don't you go sign up to be a knight? It's a waste of talent to just stay by my side. He replied with a smile, forget it, my swordsmanship is just average. The truly impressive thing is your imagination, young master. Returning to reality, attacks were constantly being launched at Isaac. However, Isaac blocked them all. While fighting, he thought to himself, why do I suddenly remember his words? Back then, Lucas didn't explain any further, but now I understand what he meant. This imagination was a product of the days spent under house arrest. Because I couldn't see the outside world, my inner senses became increasingly acute. During those long hours lost in daydreams, I fought Lucas countless times. From visualizing magic I couldn't yet cast to painting a future that seemed impossible. It was those countless experiences in my mind that created who I am today. Opposite him, Livonius launched another attack. Seeing that, Isaac also swung his hand to retaliate. Their attacks collided in midair, creating a loud explosion. Isaac thought to himself, Lucas, you really were a great teacher. By now, all the wooden stakes that Livonius had brought were gone. However, Isaac didn't let his guard down. That's surely not all you have, right? Being a bishop and having to rely on a grimoire to launch those stakes, you don't look like a man of God at all. Hearing him say that, Livonius gritted his teeth in anger. To avoid revealing my signature techniques, I have refrained from using my divine power directly. But now, I have no choice. He threw the book in his hand to the ground, concentrating his magic power into his palm. Open your eyes and look. This is the divine power gifted to me, holy fire. Isaac widened his eyes as he looked up, and saw a massive blue fireball hovering in the air. However, that only made the protagonist feel more confused. This is holy fire. Livonius nodded proudly. Exactly. This cleansing fire is something common mages couldn't copy even in their wildest dreams. With this, your ice crystals will evaporate in. Before he could finish his sentence, Isaac interrupted. Are you talking about this? At that moment, an identical fireball appeared in his palm, leaving the fat man extremely bewildered, unable to understand why. Livonius seemed unable to accept the reality of the situation and demanded furiously, how were you able to create that flame? Isaac replied in a completely calm tone, it's simple. Just create the fire and compress it twice, that's all. This only made Livonius find it even more unbelievable. Are you mocking me? Powers don't work like that. In response, Isaac decided to enlighten the old man. That might be true for the old church's powers, but it seems I am a heretic. Because my magic is dual-path magic, which is the only reason I could pull this off. As soon as he finished speaking, the flame in his hand suddenly began to burn more intensely than ever before. Then, it even shifted to a deep purple color. Witnessing this made Livonius's eyes nearly pop out of their socket. Absurd, how is that possible? There is no way a power like that would be granted to someone with such filthy blood. Isaac extinguished the magic in his hand and said, oh, perhaps the gods favor me a bit more. The remark caused Livonius's expression to stiffen completely. His hands began to tremble. That is blasphemy, I have trained this power for decades. With that, he fired the fireball in his hand straight toward Isaac with wind-tearing speed. Meanwhile, the protagonist stood there calmly, thinking to himself, decades, you say? Well, I've been training it my whole life. His gaze turned icy cold. He slowly raised his hand forward. A column of purple fire, even more terrifying, erupted from his fingertips. It pierced through the blue fireball and headed straight for Livonius, causing beads of sweat to pour down his face. Isak spoke calmly, "Because I pity you, Bishop, I will let you know the reason you have to die. And that reason is that it would be a huge hassle if word got out that I know how to use magic." Just like that, Livonius took a direct hit from the magic, and in the end his body was scorched to black charcoal. As for Isak himself, he coughed a few times, hanking after that terrifying attack, as maintaining magic of this magnitude for so long was still too much for him. The person who arrived was Kyle. He was supporting Randolph, whose body was covered in blood. His eyes widened slightly when he looked ahead at the pile of burnt charcoal and asked, "What happened here?" Isak turned to look at him with a hesitant gaze and thought, "Unlike Bill, Kyle hasn't signed a contract. It's best to keep the fact that I know how to use magic hidden." Thinking this, he made up an excuse. The deacon and the bishop had a falling out, and as you can see, they ended up taking each other out. This story left Kyle feeling somewhat surprised. Is that really so? Isak felt just as suspicious as he did, having no intention of asking anything further, he thought to himself. Meanwhile, Kyle didn't ask anything more but reported, "I've cleared out the holy knights outside." Isak nodded, but then he fell into deep thought and asked, "What about Randolph?" Kyle glanced slightly at Randolph and replied, "He asked me to take care of his family." Time passed quickly. Randolph's funeral was held. Even the family head was present to attend. In another corner, Randolph's wife and 2 sons were weeping with sorrowful expressions. From a distance, Isak quietly observed this and asked, "How did Randolph die? We should at least let his family know." Kyle replied, "Those holy knights were highly skilled, but Randolph could have survived if I had given my all." The statement left Isak slightly silent. After a few seconds he asked, "You mean you didn't do that?" "I had to play the part of a common soldier until I could kill that man," Kyle replied. However, this made Isak have a different line of thought. "That means you accepted staying hidden until you had your revenge, even if it meant sacrificing the life of your close friend." On his side, Kyle continued to warn Isak, "I'm saying this in advance just so the young master is prepared. If you ever fall into a similar situation, I would still act exactly the same way." He spoke with an incredibly serious face. Isak turned to ask, "Even if I am the one helping you get your revenge?" Kyle affirmed once more, "That's right. The day I reveal my full strength can only be that day." Isak understood that the day he was talking about was the day he would collect his blood debt as Kyle, not as Carlson. Thinking that, he only calmly said, "I understand. Both you and I are people who have no right to attend a proper funeral." Time moved on. The scene shifted to the inside of a carriage. At this moment, Isak and his father were having a quick conversation. His father spoke first. "The preparations for negotiations with the Holy See are all set. In exchange for us turning a blind eye to the bishop's crimes, they will no longer collect the 10% tax, and no new bishop will be sent here either. However, it's unclear how long they will keep their word. But for now, Goth has escaped the mess of the old church, just as you had calculated." Isak gave a slight nod. Inside, he felt a bit of joy. Good, the obstacle has been cleared, time to prepare for the next step. On his side, Count Goth continued, "Next time Carlson is here, I will give him proper praise. For now, let's talk about something else." He took a deep breath to compose himself. He interlaced his 10 fingers and admitted, "I didn't know anything at all. From the fact that the cult's rituals were so brutal, to the fact that they brought 13 holy knights along, to the fact that the bishop himself was the one who founded that twisted cult to carry out such depraved acts. I was completely in the dark. While you knew everything, while I was completely oblivious. What on earth has happened to you? Before I went to Winterband, you were just a weak child and therefore quite special. But now, I can't even begin to guess what you're thinking anymore." Isak also fell silent before this confession. After a few seconds he spoke, "I was simply considering the interests of our family." In that moment, he seemed to have returned to being the old Isak, the one who had witnessed the downfall of the family. While Goth watched him silently and then said, "Isak, I married Adele when I was 14. At that time, we didn't even share a language. From culture, habits to ways of thinking, we were worlds apart. She was a girl with a wild streak. That period of time was hell for both of us, because we were just tools brought out to extinguish the war between the two sides. But because of that, Adele and I made a promise to each other that we would never, ever turn you children into tools of the family. Although the true meaning of this life is still a mystery, we promised to help you live lives of your own. Phew, I thought I would have to wait for you to grow up a bit more before telling you this. But who would have thought you would mature so quickly? Looking at that face of yours, I'm sure you're wondering why I'm telling you this, right? He reached out to pat Isaac's head and advised, that means it's perfectly fine for you to just carefree and be a normal child. Isaac quietly pressed his lips together and nodded, yes. In another development, inside a forest, a large man was rushing over to report to his leader. Boss, there's a letter sent from Goth. The bald man was startled. What letter? Give it here, let me see. He said that while snatching the letter and tossing it straight into the fire in front of him, I was running out of firewood for the stove, this is just what I needed. The subordinate was startled and shouted, wait, why did you burn it, boss? The boss shouted loudly, shut your mouth, those scraps of paper aren't worth a dime. No matter how many times they send these things, those people will never be the masters of this land.